What's up, everybody? Juan Chaloa. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, man. It's well, I mean, there's gonna be other people joining, but you guys, it's been a while since you just saw me and Marcus. We always have
Yeah,
guests on.
right. There's usually like us and like whole lot of people. Hey, how's it going? I want to bring up
Yep.
Juan Chaloa. You said that you were able to touch one of your clients. That
Yeah. So guys, like, I do provide genealogy services because I mean I've got a lot of experience at this point. That's how I found my tribe through genealogy. So I'll drop in the comments my website you guys can go to, and you can hire me out. I mean, but there might be a line because some people like it's kind of in demand. Like people want to hire me. I charge 25 an hour, but hey, if you even just hire me for 1 hour, I can confidently usually trace you back to the early 1800s in at least one or two branches and give you their caste label, so I can tell you if they're native, if they're Spaniard, if they're mestizo, etc. Like, it's not really hard for me anymore. I'm really practiced that. I can read the Spanish cursive, so I'm just throwing that out there. I do provide services now, but one of my clients, I did trace her back to Native American ancestor in Santa Maria del Rio and San Luis Potosi. And I was looking at Native Land CA, and it said that she would be coming from the Capuses tribe. Obviously, there's still more research to be done, right? I don't even know if they're in existence. I asked my Guachiccio brothers down in Mexico if they are. I'm waiting on a response, but obviously, we need to pair that up with some historical research of the area to really armor with the tools, right? And if they are in existence, then she could go back and respectfully try to request to join, you know? So I'm excited for her. She was really happy. She said she like teared up in the email. So it was really glad that I helped her out.
Yeah, that's
I'm excited for her. She was really happy.
You know, that you've gotten a lot of clients and whatnot, with people that are like super interested in wanting to know more about themselves. And I just feel like this podcast itself has really gotten a lot of people's attention as far as figuring out like who they are and their history.
Oh yeah, for sure, man, for sure. And like I don't know, like I guess a lot of people just don't realize the power of genealogy. Like cause I just see so many people out there, like especially on TikTok, and they're like, well, I don't know my roots. Like, how can I reconnect? And they feel so lost. And it's like, bro, you literally hold the keys right in your hand. It's like, establish your family tree, fill it out, put your grandparents, put your great grandparents if you have that. Start tracing back. The records are free on Family Search. If not, pay $40 a month on Ancestry DNA, and they're indexed there too. Or sometimes there's more of them indexed there than there are in Family Search. You can absolutely start tracing that back and find the answers. Like there's only some regions of Mexico that I would say maybe the records don't exist because they were burned down in the Cristeros War, but the Cristeros War has never affected me. I found plenty of freaking records in my tree. I have over 1,000 people in my tree, but I am a Norteño. I'm from San Luis Potosi, from Nuevo León, from Coahuila, so I haven't had a problem with that.
Yeah, and it sucks that like you said, a lot of these ancestral areas, like with books and whatnot, and records were kind of like burned down.
Right. I think that's more in like central Mexico. It might be because I know Citlali, like on Mexican Excellence, she's saying she was having a hard time, but I think she was tracing to Michoacan, and I forgot the other state, but she was having a little bit of a rough time, like with them not being indexed. But another thing is, like, even if they're not indexed on these sites like Family Search or Ancestry DNA, the books might be there. So that's just because nobody's actually gone and physically labeled them, but you can still look through the book yourself and try to find it. It's just really time consuming if you do it that way. But if you don't have a choice, that's what you're stuck with, right? So
it's interesting to me how sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say Crispin said I think he's about to join. Yeah.
It's interesting how the priests, and I assume they were Spanish priests, or maybe there are other priests too, that like really wanted to keep detailed labels of everyone, records of everyone.
Right. There is something else I wanted to mention though, because people will run into this. This is what I've noticed. If you have ancestry in Chihuahua, I've noticed that the priests there, or at least the government of Chihuahua, because I was speaking with a native friend of mine. I don't want to put her business out there, so I'm not going to name her. But it seems like they were on purpose, like mislabeling the people, because my friend had people that were part of a tribe. She knows that. She's like, very Native American, knows her ancestors. Then in Chihuahua, her ancestors that were part of a tribal community were basically full-blooded, the Spanish priests were labeling them as mestizos and mulattoes, which I thought was really fucked up. So I don't know. It's weird. Like certain places, they would label you. Definitely, they did and it would be accurate. Other places, they would try to falsify it for whatever agenda they had. Because I myself have researched for multiple clients in Chihuahua, like two, and I hardly ever see like Indio or full-blooded records in Chihuahua, and I'm just like, that's kind of suspect, like because I see them all the time in all these other states, right? So I was like, there's no way. I think there's something fishy going on with Chihuahua.
That's very sus.
Yeah, it's like, bro, how's everyone mestizo in Chihuahua, especially going back 200-300 years? It's like not a single Indio, bro. When there's a bunch of Indios over there in San Luis and Coahuila and Nuevo Leon, like in the same time period, no way. There's something fucking fishy going on.
You know what I think is fishy is that, like, if you look through their whole, like, messed up, like, the conquistadors, like the Spanish colonizers, like, caste system, you find like a black man and like a Native woman. I think, what did they call that? Like, not mulatto, but some sort of like label they created. But they never had like a full on Native man and like a half Native woman, half something else. At least I don't think they had a word for that. So it makes me wonder if they were, afraid of like the indigenous like population, repopulating more again. Well, they did have an agenda.
They definitely did. And the caste charts that I've seen online, bro, like they'll also they'll have like obviously the degrees and the shades, right? The people, right? But they'll always have it to where, they'll show how you can become a Spaniard if you're mixed, but they never show the opposite, how you can become an Indio from mixing with the other Indios. I think it's kind of fucking weird.
We got here that was Zambo.
Zambo? Oh yeah, that's a term I'm not as familiar with, but I'll run with that, yeah.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah, thank you.
We had someone in. I'm gonna accept him.
All right.
Didn't mean to cut you off.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, Lakota Guy?
Man, huge group today, bro.
Yeah.
Marcus got all excited. At first, it was just there's a guy named Crispin coming in. He's like a Northern Native brother. I believe he's Haudenosaunee. But okay. He was gonna join in, and I thought it was just gonna be the three of us. But then Marcus was like, "No, I want everybody."
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he changed his mind, bro.
We had a good dialogue last time, though, so I don't blame him.
Oh yeah, you hit it off with New Amouta really well, man. It's like you guys could go on for hours, man.
That was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It's great talking to people like that know their stuff and not talking about. So listen, look, guys, I'm light-skinned. So does that mean I'm not Indian? It's like, come on, man. Let's have deeper conversations.
I want more intellectual conversations.
Oh, Mexican Excellence. Citlali just said, "Hi, fam. I am here. I may join in a bit." Oh, that'd be epic. So, but
those are like TikTok dialogues, right? I mean, it's all about colorism there, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of it myself, man. I just got a shit comment the other day, so it was just like the guy just pissed me off, man. And I was just typing up all these paragraphs and shit, and then I was like, you know what? This is a waste of my time, so I just blocked him from my channel. I was like, fuck you.
That's sometimes you have to do that. It's the best way. Just don't fucking dialogue. Just block.
Yeah. No, but for you guys in the live chat, this guy was saying that he was saying, since I'm so white, right? Because I obviously look really fucking white to you guys. Since I'm so white, I can't talk about white people in the third person, or because I'm part of a white community, supposedly. I was like, dude, you must be freaking stupid. I don't know. You must have gotten dropped as a baby or something. I don't know.
I think he was just a major troll.
Yeah, I guess. But he threw in those backhanded compliments to try to gaslight, because he was like, oh well, I actually appreciate you guys' content, and then he would try to be like, why are you acting like a child with your responses, like getting angry? And it's like, because you fucking insulted me. Why do you you insult somebody? Yeah, they're gonna get angry, man. It's pretty natural. Like, are you dumb? Oh my god. But yeah, his name was Greg. When I saw that first name, I was like, oh, bro, I already know this guy's gonna be an asshole. As soon as I saw Greg,
that's a very indigenous name there.
Greg.
You know what baffles me all the time is that people don't understand the diversity of our phenotypes. They think indigenous people all look the same, and they don't understand that like northern indigenous people, Inuit, all the way down to Mapuche, we all look completely different, and they have this preconceived notion of what an indigenous person looks like. If you don't fit it, then they could they basically terrorize you in comments.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Like, and I always try to make them feel stupid. I'm like, you are aware that genetic diversity exists in races, right? Like, it's like, cause yeah, I mean, I've seen full bloods that are lighter skinned than me. They're like pale. There's some down in Ecuador. I remember this guy named Adalupa Raw, like, sent me a picture. I need to get it at some point. But these guys were full bloods and they had like pale skin down there where he lives. And I'm just like, I was like, but no one's gonna go up to them and say you're not native. Like, it's dumb. Like, it's like we have a broad range of diversity with our race. Like, it's not like we're not all carbon copies of each other. We're not like Jango Fett, bro. We're not all copies of Jango Fett. So they act.
Yeah.
We're not Lego men.
Yep, exactly. So these people's, insults that they try to, attacking us, saying like, no, you can't be native this because you're too light or something like that. It just gets to a point where, just stop talking to them, because they're never going to be, maybe sometimes they'll be convinced and you can change their mind, but a lot of the time they're just going to keep on going. So,
I did change. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I did change one guy's mind on our channel that was like foaming at the mouth and like at my throat. But like I don't know. I typed up like a whole essay and I like basically insulted him like 20,000 times and beat him up verbally. And then eventually he was like, "Oh, actually, I changed my mind." I was like, "Wow!" After all that effort, man. Whole essay, bro.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is just that's the issue. There's pros and cons to large platforms like TikTok and social media. Is that you get a lot of people in there, you get a lot of opportunities for people reconnecting, but at the same time, the nuance of conversations just can't be had. I mean, we can't literally specifically talk about like the reformation of the International Treaty Council of 1977 because people don't know what it is, they don't know what it did, and they don't know anything. So all they want to do is chime in on things they can participate in, which is basic things, color, how you look like, what you present at. So it's like the conversation always gets drawn back to this very infantile level of dialogue, and we never get to the nuance. And I think we're missing a big opportunity talking about that together, especially Indigenous people like all across the Western Hemisphere, and that's the big tragedy of it, is that we get sidetracked.
Yeah. All that infighting, right? And it always goes back to the infighting. Can't ever get anything done. Speaking
of infighting and getting things done, kind of has to do with our podcast video, the live today, coming together and, the disagreements and the things that, we see amongst ourselves, because I always say that we're our biggest enemy. I think it's been that way since the beginning of colonization. So I was trying to figure out ways we can all come together on some sort of consensus. But I think that we might still have a little bit of ways to go. Lakota Guy, what would you say? I mean, you think you see it more than I do, obviously. There is a lot of maybe distrust or disagreements between certain tribes in the United States.
Well, what I experienced, I think the last month is that there was a woman. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. I apologize. I don't know what she identifies as because I thought she presented female, but I think she identifies something else, and I need to be cognizant of that. I'm a Gen Xer. Give me a break, right? But she basically presented the argument that there was a lot of nuance in it. There was a back and forth, and I made a video basically about. She's like, well, all Northern natives, they're so focused on themselves. They don't include Southern, Mesoamerican indigenous people. And she presented a slide. It was an Instagram slide of this woman explaining, like, if you want to identify as indigenous in Canada, this is the requirements. In the United States is the requirements. And the person presenting the information was actually a Mohawk woman in Eastern Woodlands tribe. And I think that the goal of what she was trying to say was to articulate, what it means to be authentically indigenous to white people who want to talk over our voices all the time and say, hey, I have a headdress on Halloween and I'll wear it no matter what you say. And it's like, no, you don't fit the criteria of being indigenous, so you can't speak for us. And that's a big challenge we have in our community, is that we have, a lot of pretendians that aren't tied to actual indigenous groups, aren't related, do not really, you know, seek it in traditional, genuine ways, but at the same time want to go out there and dress like Pocahontas and say the things they say and be very toxic in our community. So, you know, this it's a nuance, right? We talk about nuance and complexities and these things. And, you know, she was like, well, you know, this is us not being mentioned again. And I said, hey, you know, there's a real and present issue with Mesoamerican, South American, indigenous people not being as visible as northern indigenous people, especially in the United States, Canada, media, all that stuff. I mean, give me a break. I'm Lakota, right? The Sioux Nation has been completely appropriated by Hollywood since the 50s, right? Teepees, headdresses, that's all my people, right? So even the word how, you know, you had John Wayne saying how. So, I mean, talk about appropriation. So no, everyone is clocked in on, you know, that Hollywood persona of what an Indian is. So, you know, for us having to fight that together has been a big issue. And I think this conversation of nuance with her turned a little toxic because she didn't want to understand that, hey, you know, there's things that we do in, you know, in what we call the United States and the you know, First Nations communities that, you know, Mesoamericans aren't privy to, and vice versa. We don't know everything about each other, and we don't have that opportunity to get to know each other. So, I think the opportunity for us, especially me as a you know, a Plains indigenous man, is to understand and listen better to my, you know, Mexican indigenous, Central South American indigenous brothers and sisters, and try to understand these nuances, try to understand the complexities. And I think as us together as indigenous people, we have to have that open heart with each other and openness with each other and saying, hey, you know, Lakota Guy doesn't know everything about us, and maybe I should, you know, take what he says and say, hey, you know, like, this is a learning opportunity for you. You know, this is really what's going on, or this is, and I'm open to that. I'm totally okay with being wrong. And I think more people need to have that conversation, need to have an understanding of it's okay to be wrong, but just start asking questions about one another.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think I saw that back and forth that you're talking about on TikTok. And I thought what you had to say was a good response. It was appropriate. But then I saw everybody in the comments, like on your video, trying to demonize you, saying this, this, and this. I'm just like, how did you get all those conclusions from his video when he didn't say any of that? Like, what is up with you guys? But it always goes back to the logical fallacy people call a straw man. Like, they'll attack a point you never made up in order to defeat you because they can't actually defeat your main argument. It's really stupid. I don't know why everybody does it, but yeah, no, I mean, given that nuance, explaining the situation, yeah, why would the woman have talked about Mesoamericans in that context? There was no reason to. The focus was on you guys because of enrollment and having those requirements. Because I can't, I'll tell you, every time any discussion comes up, like, no, this was recent. So the Cherokee Nation was telling, like, the company Jeep, right, to stop using Jeep Cherokee, right, to stop using that as far as their models. And I thought that was valid. But as soon as that happened, and my local news agency here reported it here, and I live in Huntsville, Alabama, everybody in the comments suddenly was native. All these white people were native in the comments. They're like, oh, yeah, like, I'm part Cherokee, and in my opinion, this is stupid. This doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I was like, no. Stop playing that fucking game, man. Like, that's like me saying, oh, I'm 4% black, so as a black person, I'm going to opine on Black Lives Matter. That's dumb. But it's like, you're not native. You're not native. Like, Marcus saw this, too. Like, I sent him a thread of those comments a while back, but it's like you can't claim something when you didn't, like, you know, first of all, you don't present like that. Second of all, you're not even part of that nation. And if you were, you wouldn't be disagreeing with them because that's your tribal leadership pretty much saying what their stance is. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Sorry, Marcus, go ahead.
No, you're good. My problem with that is that, are we going to have those, and maybe particularly in indigenous communities, that might stick up for those people, for these, you know, 1% indigenous blood people saying, oh, my great grandfather was Cherokee, therefore I can say this. Will there be people that will stick up for them? I wonder, like, full on indigenous, you know, people from tribes.
Well, see, this is the complexity of, like, you know, federal trust responsibility, right? So in the United States, we have a completely different colonized situation where we have Supreme Court rulings that have defined us as domestic dependents of the United States in what we call the Marshall Trilogy, which is a Supreme Court ruling, the first one being Cherokee versus Georgia, right? And basically that was about a mission, of all things, a goddamn missionary that didn't want to leave Cherokee territory and be brought to justice by the Georgia law enforcement. So they took it to the Supreme Court and they said, well, look, the jurisdiction of the Cherokee Nation is domestic dependence of the United States. So what that did is it proceeded to cloak all these nations as domestic dependent. So we are no longer looked at as an ethnicity and a race, because we've never been racialized, because again, race is a social European construct. We're looked at as being nations, right? So Cherokee Nation, let's take them because they're huge, right? And they're so much different than my nation. Even we're both like quote unquote, in the United States. They look at lineage. Theirs is a lineage descendant, and it's important to understand also the nuance of things like the Indian Reorganization Act. And what that did is that it said, and it chartered colonial style constitutional governments for all tribes. So all tribes are run by a constitutional government called an IRA government. That's why you have a tribal council, you have elections, you have people voting. These weren't traditional like indigenous ways of governing, but that's what we have now. So now, we have things like blood quantum, lineage. And so what does it mean to be Indian, in the United States? What does that mean? And I think, when we look at blood quantum and IRA governments and what it means to enroll as being indigenous, that's one thing. So I'm of a mindset that if you're enrolled in your nation, and it's a citizenship, it's a sovereign citizenship, you are indigenous. And it doesn't matter if you're 2% native, if you're, phenotypically 100% native, like myself or something. What it is that if you look at our registration, if you look at enrollment, I believe that if you are, you got lineage, you got blood and all that stuff, you're equally indigenous. I don't play the blood quantum game. I think it's a stupid game to play. So in that aspect, I think that people that are authentically reconnecting is good. Even if you look phenotypically maybe white or European or you're Afro-Indigenous, you present as an African-American, but you're indigenous. I think you're authentically indigenous if you're, tribally enrolled and you understand, how to connect with your culture. But again, with the Cherokee princess thing. So what we have is that we have this goofy colonizer mentality of appropriating indigenous identity as cannon fodder for political gain, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, the Washington Redskins doesn't offend me because, I'm Cherokee, right? Oh, well, it's funny, Harold Faltermeyer. Like, when's the last time you claimed to be indigenous, right? You never did. Well, we have high cheekbones. We have this and that. The Elizabeth Warrenization of indigenous culture. So, that is the nuance we have. So, I hate to say to people, man, like, you're not indigenous. You shouldn't have, a conversation here. But I think now's the time to talk about that, because people are weaponizing their quote unquote fake, indigenous lineage in order to say things and promote, conservative talking points, anti-indigenous talking points, and like try to spur and create a false narrative that indigenous people support an opposing view that the majority of indigenous people support.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just seems like, then it goes to, it's a really tricky situation then in that case, because of the Cherokees are going off the lineage, right? So, you can be very low and be Cherokee, but then, so I mean, it's hard to tell the difference then in that case. Like if somebody's really just appropriating it just for clout on social media, well, they're dumb and I'm Cherokee, or if they're actually authentically Cherokee, gets kind of hairy when you put on all the nuance or you bring it up into the discussion.
But essentially is what I want to bring up, Wanchalo and Lakota Guy, is that we should ignore these clowns, the ones that say that like, oh, my great grandfather, those saying these things for political gain. They don't deserve to be recognized at all as indigenous people.
And I think, that brings me to a nuance I wanted to talk to you about and ask you guys, as a Plains native, as a Lakota, we look at things like, and I think Thomas Oklahoma actually put some in the comment here, we have a common theme of who we are, right? And DNA has really helped us with that. Mitochondrial DNA, especially with haplogroups A, B, C, D, and X, and X2, of us all being the same. Even the Olmec were tested as being haplogroup A, right? Maternal haplogroup A, which is great. I mean, that tells us that our ancestors, Lucia, what is that? Naya, Naiaa, Naya. Please forgive me if I mispronounce the name. All haplogroup, mitochondrial haplogroup A. They're all ancestral relatives of present day indigenous people. So that tells us that, you know, we're identity. But, you know, can you explain? Maybe you two can explain to me as a Plains native, how do we overcome the nuance of race and European social constructs in quote unquote Spanish speaking colonized countries? I mean, how do we unite under that banner? How do we see each other as indigenous in the complexity of a colonized you know, systems that have been colonized by the Spanish in Portuguese? Let me know.
So you want to know what our standards are, basically?
Yeah,
Down
like
south?
like, so if someone comes up to you and says, hey, you know, like am I indigenous or not? Well, I mean, what do you say to them? I mean, and say you don't know them, or, you know, because you know, I've seen people like that too, where they'll call me Indio, and it's like, dude, you're as dark as him, you know, like, so they don't, you know, they don't see themselves as indigenous. So how do we, you know, as Northern natives, like, how do we properly educate and help Southern indigenous people that may not know that they're indigenous or not want to claim it? I mean, is there anything we can do? Is there, what's the procedure there? I mean, what can we do?
So that is, I'll go first real quick. Like, it's complex because even I struggle a little bit with it, because it's kind of like a grenade, pulling the pin on a grenade. You don't know if it's going to explode or not. And that's what you get with these motherfuckers. Like, you don't know if it's going to be an insult, you know, to tell them, hey, you're actually indigenous. And they're going to be like, what are you talking about? I'm Spaniard, I'm white. You know, or if they're, or
you, what?
or if you freaking, you know, or if they're going to accept that and be like, thank you for that. Right. So I don't know, man. Like, it's just because of the colonialism. Like, you have to bring it up in a really delicate way. Like, I call it social maneuvering. You have to be like, you bring up the topic softly is what I say. That's what I had to do with my family, because yeah, you don't know who you're going to offend with that. But yeah, I mean, you're right. You have people that are genetically pure Native Americans, and they don't see themselves as Native. They think they're mestizo. They think they're Spanish. They think they're like me. They think they're like 50% something. Like,
this is
like,
the way that I think that they're brought up. And, you know, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that they're brought up in a system where they are taught at a very young age that, you know, you're a Latino, you cannot be indigenous. And then they bring up the history of indigenous people, and they look at the tribes, not tribes, well, I guess tribes and those that live in rural areas, not in urbanized cities, of course. And they're taught, I think they are taught about them through a negative colonized lens, of course. So they're taught that they are a Latino, and that this culture is nothing like the indigenous culture. Therefore, you cannot be an indigenous person. You are a Latino, mestizo, and that is how life will be for you. Now, how we break that down to them when we bring up the logistical flaw, shall I say, of this type of teaching. And here's my 2 cents when I bring it up. I was like, okay, first off, we are using mestizo. This is borrowed from the colonizers, who essentially wanted to erase us. They wanted us gone. Why are we still using this word? And then my second part would be, look at me, like, such as, you know, me as Marcus, as, you know, indigenous person, and then looking at my friend who is, maybe it doesn't really matter, 25, 50, 70, they clearly have indigenous features as well. What is saying that racially identifying as a mestizo, like, where will that get us? Like, I want to see us progress as indigenous people, to unite under one cause. And the cause right now is that our brothers and sisters are being wiped out through political means, through government, through military, how would I say, yeah, issues, like the Zapatistas in southern Mexico, in Guatemala, the evidence is there. I don't need to continue on and say more. So why would we want to use a word that may not, racially be who we are? Mestizo, I think, is used as a pro, European first word, again, created by the colonizers themselves. If you look at every government census, you see that word's there in South and Central America, or it's Latino. Again, it's used to, wipe us, or the indigenous, identity out and bring in this new mixed identity created by, helped by Jose Vasconcelos. He was very much, pro-Europe, pro-white first, and then everything else later. And he was, I would say he wasn't a very good guy. I think Juanchelo and I will cover more on this person in another video.
Oh yeah, we were probably going to do like a series reading his book, but I was going to say, Lakota Guy, I don't know if you've tried to talk to Southern Indigenous that are still like kind of brainwashed about it, but my opinion is maybe if it came from a Northern Native, you could get through them faster than I could, because they're going to look at me and be like, oh, you're just a dumbass mestizo. But if they'll look at you, you're Lakota, they might be like, oh, holy shit, let me think about this. Like this guy's like, the real deal. And then they'll actually start pondering it. One time I was talking to this Southern Indigenous woman. She didn't know she was Indigenous, but it was when I was training with the military at Fort Leonard Wood. She was from Guatemala, and I was telling her that she's Indigenous, and I explained how I retribalized. I went back to my tribe. They accepted me and all that. And for a second, she thought that my tribe was located up here, like within U.S. borders, and she got all excited. And she's like, "Oh my God, like you're like Native American, like like the tribes here in the U.S." And I'm like, "No, they're in San Luis Potosí, Mexico." And then like all the excitement vanished from her face. It's like she didn't care anymore. I was like, what's the difference? It's like it's still a tribe. We still have our own culture, our own customs, our own history. Like. So it's like, so what's the difference? But yeah, that's what I'm saying. They might go back to, maybe if you say it to some of them, you might be able to get through them faster than I could. So,
but I think the thing that I want to use more is like, look at the acceptance level of being part of a tribe of the United States. What is it, like 25%, like Native American?
Well, it varies, but a lot of them have that. Yeah.
If we use those on a country like Bolivia or Peru, it wouldn't even like. The history books would change forever in terms of like who the indigenous populations being so small, especially even 50%. And again, like, I don't like using blood quantum, but in this very situation, I am using it. And when you use, those, someone said, or Argentina's a different beast, I think, my friend. But I think that like when you use these terms, I think you can change the mind of a lot of people. I think if they really want to like help, indigenous people, we should be one with them. Their problem is our problem. An attack on them is an attack on us.
Yeah, it goes back to the root cause. It goes back to the root cause, because like one protest I have from people that don't agree is like, well, the indigenous people in Mexico, the ones that are full blood still have their nation. They're oppressed by the mestizos, and so they use that as an excuse to saying we can't reconnect or we can't re-indigenize. And I'm like, okay, but you're complaining about a symptom without even tackling the root issue. The root issue is the concept that we are separate, that we're somehow better or different because we're a little more white. It's like you remove that, you completely destroy that ideology, and the racism goes away, because then it's like, oh no, we're all the same. We're all indigenous, and that's not something to be ashamed about anymore. That's something that to take pride in and that you want to go back to. So that's what I always argue. It's like you want to treat the symptoms instead of trying to tackle the root issues. It's like you'll always be treating the symptoms for centuries then.
It's always difficult to talk to Southern, especially people in the United States that are quote unquote Mexican American. It's easier, and I understand the privilege, and I think that there's a privilege that needs to be said for like Plains natives, and having a last name like Eagle Thunder, which is mine, which is like literally indigenous, right? Like that's not like a Americanized or German last name, Eagle Thunder, Wambly Wakian, you know? So it's like the conversation's already started, you know, oh, you know, like, what are you? You know, it's like, oh my God, here we go. You know, like, and the thing with the United States is that they can't let go of race. They can't look at people and put them in little boxes. It's such a goofy, like, European thing, you know, like, oh, you know, he's indigenous. Let's ask him. So what do you think about Pocahontas? You know, it's like, come on, man, I'm trying to work, you know? And when we talk about, you know, Mexican Americans, what I run into a lot is that they're proudly nationalistic. Everything, you know, like Mexicano, you know, like, yes, that's exactly what it's like. Okay, yeah, but what's, you know, what are you? You know, like, where did your people come from? You know, what Puebla? You know, tell me about who you are. No, Mexicano. You know, that's it. You know, I'm from Chihuahua or you know, any, you know, somewhere down, you know, Michoacan. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean to me? I mean, because you're dark like I am, like, tell me your story. And they don't want to have the conversation because I don't know if it's, I don't know the complexity there. And that's something that I'm interested in, because we need to have an indigenous renaissance in order to get, you know, things passed, in order for it to have a stronger and a more diverse movement to get a lot of things done, like deconstructing ICE, deconstructing colonized borders. Like, if we don't have an indigenous renaissance of people that are literally identifying themselves by nationalistic identity, we're not going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Sixali, go ahead and introduce. Yeah, go ahead and get your say. You've been waiting, so I know we're all eager.
It's all good. Thank you all, relatives, for joining in. I'm going to be here a little bit. I'm not sure how long, because I have my son. You know how it is. But one thing I have been listening to y'all, and I'm really appreciative of the conversation. One of the things that I've come across my research, and I, you know, nationally identified as Mexican, so my research has that framework of Mexican decolonial work. And back to the concept of mestizaje, you know, it was really interesting for me because we've known these ideas, right? I've been doing this work for a while, but the actual intentionality behind mestizaje being an actual policy from the government, that is like found in the archive. Like, you can read the writings of the Mexican government, where in the early 1800s, because again, like, people think mestizaje began in 1500. Yes, the actual supposedly biological thing that they are claiming, but the actual, like, refining of the concept, the term, the refining of the national spectrum of it, it actually got refined in the 1800s. And it was an effort because of the resistance movements. If you look at the history of Mexico, the resistance has not stopped. It kept going century after century after century. So in the 1800s, there's this complete, you know, regression of like, okay, how do we jump on this national board? How do we become independent as Mexico for the criollos? And how do we bring on this indigenous population? And so what I have found out in the studies is that mestizaje was a way to repress resistance. It was a way because they were outnumbered. The Spanish, the criollos, the other Europeans, they were outnumbered by millions of indigenous people. They couldn't contain us. You know, they tried with religion. They've tried with, you know, cultural genocide. They've tried to convert us. They went through these, you know, public executions to execute our ancestors that were practicing sacred ways. I mean, this is massive. They tried multifaceted ways to say, how do we contain these people? These people, we can't get them, right? And so the Casa, the white elite of Mexico, this is early 1800s, mid 1800s, they were like, no, if we identify them as mestizo, we dilute their identity and they're forced to identify with us. So therefore the repression, you can't fight for indigenous rights because we're telling you you're not indigenous anymore. You're part of us now. So you're fighting yourself. Hence that argument, oh, you know, you're half this, you're half that. And so it's very interesting the way it's done as a political intention to say, no, we have to kill the resistance. How do you kill people from uprising? You tell them they're not the people who they are, right? They're not the people that they're identifying with as they are uprising. And that to me was really, really, really powerful because in the 1800s, late 1800s, the majority of Mexicans were still speaking an indigenous language. That was still like the power of indigenous culture was still being felt in the 1800s, you know? And so it's really important to me, like this whole concept of mestizaje, this whole idea, it works completely, it works racially for the white elite. And that's why they're so aggressive in pushing it on our people. And it really, like we're all talking about here, if we expose it, if we deconstruct it, if we disempower it, and we dismantle it, it really is going to show how indigenous cultures, indigenous identities are still like in the vibrant phase. We're still here. We're still, in this ideas of multiple plural societies. And it's so important to me because I was like, wow, that really, really like took me. In about 30% of the population in the early 1900s, they were forced, 30% of the population that were indigenous before identified by the government, all of a sudden were identified as mestizo. 30% of the population, I believe that was 3.5 million at the time. That's huge. That's massive, right? And so the roots of how now we internalize these ideas, the diaspora of Mexicans, Central Americans, South Americans, it's really powerful because it has a really politically intended purpose, and we're living the consequence, right? The hate that we get, the hate mail, all these gaslighting of indigenous identities. It's like, that's exactly what's happening. It's to demoralize us. It's to say, you're white anyway. It's a white world. It's a white future. Get over it. It's part of this assimilation machine that wants to kill indigenous people, right? All of us, north and south, Abya Yala to Turtle Island, everything. We're not supposed to exist in the system of Americanism. We're supposed to be forced labor, but we're not supposed to be vibrant, thriving. And oh my goodness, can you imagine we're actually free? Like, that is the biggest threat to this system of white supremacy. And I wanted to share that because it's like, it's interesting as a historian. I'm like, wow, they wrote this shit. Like, they wrote it. I'm not making it up. We're not here making stuff up. It's all like traceable. It's all there. We just have to bring it to full light.
You're right, Zalali. Essentially, they want us assimilated into a culture that isn't really ours. I think that's how in Mexico, that culture is not meant designed for indigenous culture to rise and thrive. We see it today, and it still continues. So
this is kind of a sad thing to say, but listening to you, sister, thank you so much, and I love your opinion. I mean, the fire that you're bringing is awesome, and educating me, and that's something that all of us need to learn. Thank you so much for educating all of us with the understanding of the deconstruction of the Indian. That's what it is, right? And I think this is a real sad thing, but the deconstruction of the Indian was successful with encomienda and caste systems compared to the American colonized system of just genocide and eraser. They tried to reassign us to be quote unquote kill the Indian, save the man with Carlisle boarding school, with Indian boarding schools. We repatriated. I'm a Rosebud Sioux tribal member. We repatriated 9 children from Rosebud just 2 days ago. We went to Carlisle, got their bodies, brought them back home, and buried them back on the reservation. So this idea of it's a failed identity switch with us, and I think for us to try to have these nuanced conversations with those that are open to it and say, hey, like, I understand, you're proud to be Mexican, or you're proud to be, Central American, South American, but let's talk about your indigenous identity, because that's important. That blood still runs through you. And it doesn't matter if your last name is Sanchez or Eagle Thunder or whatever, you're still equally indigenous. It doesn't matter all of the nuances, your phenotype, if you have long hair or not. I mean, I think we get tied to these goofy identity, qualifiers, and we don't really understand how to have open hearts to people that are reconnecting.
Yes, and if I may add, Lakota Guy, the last name, you hit on a really, really good topic there, because a lot of us assume that Spanish names came through this glamorous experience. Oh, your great-great-grandfather fell in love and procreated, and hence here comes your Spanish last name, where it wasn't that way. It was through forced conversions. We have the records, right? We have how the naming patterns of indigenous societies of Mexico followed the Catholic, Judeo-Christian laws of naming saints and all this. So it wasn't this romantic, idea. It was through a very robust genocidal approach to kill indigenous people, our languages, our names. So if you trace your last name, it's not about tracing your great-great-grandfather. It's about who was in power in the town that your ancestors were living in, and how did their names get changed by the Catholic Church.
Absolutely. I've also seen like people that like, well, you know, the haters always have anything to say, right? But they'll attack the whole, you got a Spanish last name, and I always make them feel stupid. I'm just like, dude, you know how last names work? Like, you got some shit loose up there or something? No, I've traced the genealogy to for a lot of my native ancestors to these small villages, and the records stop at a certain time because these people weren't Catholic. They weren't even registered with the government or anything, right? They were just out living. And yeah, they suddenly show up to the church and they're getting baptized and married, and they have Spanish last names. How do you think that happens? It's not because they married a bunch of Spaniards, because they were just assigned one. Like, it doesn't mean anything. It's irrelevant. So yeah, I mean, it was purposely given. That's why you don't see a lot of, like, out of all the Indios, actually, out of all the natives I've traced in my genealogy, I've found 65, 64. I don't think, not one of them, even the full bloods, even the ones that are labeled with the tribe, don't even have a indigenous last name. They have a Spanish one. So
I'm 97% sure that's not taught in school, that like we went through this whole process of forced, assimilation, as far as like giving full on indigenous people like Spanish last names. So people just assume that we're like half, European, half indigenous, or we can't possibly be full on indigenous people, which is silly. I am actually 100% sure that's not taught.
How do we disrupt the comfort of the status quo of identity with, Mesoamerican Southern indigenous people that only identify nationalistically? Because I think a big part of it is them being so comfortable in this national identity, and they don't want to disrupt that because they don't want to, they just don't see a benefit in it, and they don't see how they can literally reconnect. So they're just really proud of a nationalistic point of view, and that's totally propelled by the media and this colonized media, European beauty standards, all this other stuff. I mean, you look at telenovelas and all these things we talked about before last week of propelling European standards. So how do we disrupt this comfort level with them and re-indigenize these people?
Excellent. Yeah. Got to diagnose the problem first. And that issue is first, like, I just came back from Guatemala and Mexico and Belize. And when I was going through, like, what was it? The Yucatan Peninsula, and not Yucatan Peninsula, but the state of Yucatan. And I forgot another name of the state, but when I would go and like see the signs of people as, as models and whatnot, I looked for indigenous people and they weren't there. It was mostly like, Spanish looking women or men for that matter. That is one major problem. And that teaches those kids at young ages that are mostly indigenous looking that the color of their skin does not matter. It is irrelevant. They should invest in these products to make their skin look lighter. Therefore, they'll have a better shot at an employment opportunity. Or if they want to, I don't know, become a model one day, you better make your skin look more light. And that's really bad. That's really terrible. It's definitely a form of genocide. Because it's making us believe that, like, I don't want to marry into, another indigenous person or have kids with them. I want to have kids with this, Spaniard looking fellow or woman. And that's how those in charge of the, the bigwigs in charge of like marketing companies, beauty companies and all that, that's how they get us.
But to go to your, at least to give an answer to you, Lakota, with that, I've talked about this with Marcus. I think the best strategy, because I don't think this can be done in like a full way, right? I think the best strategy is what if our first step was, obviously still do the work for others, right? But I'm saying the first step I would say is if we could get the majority of Mexican Americans and Chicanos or whatever to identify as indigenous, if all of them were like the majority, the 90% plus knew that, I think that would be very powerful, and that would get plenty of media attention, or at least a lot of social media attention. And then we could use that pressure, because now you have a very massive solid block of people that think this way. And then that could be pushed further down south to convince them, instead of trying to take on everything at once. And I think you'd be more successful doing that with Mexican Americans and Chicanos because they think way differently than somebody that grows up in Mexico. Although there are people that in Mexico that obviously don't think that way, that think like how we do. Like my tribe is an example, right? But I think that'd be the best strategy is first getting all of us down. What do you think, Sis Polly? I mean, you've been doing this for way longer, so.
Yeah, I don't know. Thank you. And those are all great examples of how, like I said, multifaceted it is. With myself, I grew up in Mexico about 5 years, and then I go often. My family is in Rosarito, Baja California, Jalisco. And basically what I look at, like, first of all, Mexicans are not in control in Mexico. It's still the criollos. It's still the offshoot of the Spanish and the Europeans. So that's just the standard for education, the media, mainstream. But as far as when I tell people about our indigenousness, who we are, who we truly are, the response, it's always somehow connected to religion, and it's always like, well, we were that, but then the Spaniards came and now we're Catholics, and thanks for the Catholics, now we know about Jesus Christ. So it's like it turns from identity race conversation to Christian Catholicism. You're now kind of insulting my Catholicism. So it's really heavily compared, and it comes as a grouping of identity, and that's the biggest resistance I get. It's, oh no, like being indigenous means not being Catholic, and so therefore it's like, no, I don't want to go back there. Thanks, whatever happened, I don't care. I'm a happy Catholic now, and look at my beautiful children, and I have there's blue eyes in my family, green eyes. So it's like embedded with our sense of identity at a national level. Now, as far as how do we connect, how do we disconnect them from the nationalism? Like, for example, my channel, I was under Nicantlaca Women Warriors. Nicantlaca was an indigenous term that I was using, but I very conscientiously changed it to Mexican excellence about 2 years ago. I'm very aware of how problematic the term Mexican is. I understand the history, but honestly, there's millions of us that don't know that Mexican, the majority of us are indigenous. So to me, I was like, I'm going to change, bite my tongue on this, change the name of my channel to Mexican Excellence, because I want to get this information to the people who are identified as Mexican, because that's, that's my intention for what I'm doing. Obviously, I'm thinking about pan-indigenous, I'm thinking about, continental white, but I'm doing it purposely because it's generating my people, those are known as Mexicans, into my channel. When they get to my channel, I don't have mariachis. I don't have like the stereotypical Mexican things. I'm talking about decolonization. I'm talking about indigenous, issues. And so I've been able to talk to and hopefully awaken a lot of people that way, right? Like I'm serving as an entry door into Mexico.
She's cheering you on. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
She's like, yes, mama. Well, and it's a really powerful conversation because Lakota Guy, I went to the Indigenous Peoples March in 2019, and for the first, and I was hosted by Onondaga territory. I was hosted by I met a lot of Mohawk sisters. Yes, sorry, Baba. And and for the first time, I wasn't like questioned about my indigeneity. It was like, oh, what nation are you from? Everyone I met was, what nation are you from? What nation are you from? And I was like, it was beautiful. It was such a beautiful experience to just be indigenous. That's it. Like, it wasn't like a conversation, a debate. It wasn't like PowerPoint presentation. It was just like, oh, sister, well, yeah, what nation? And I was like, like it felt so beautiful. It wasn't like a fight. It wasn't a battle. And I'm never going to forget that experience. Sorry, I'm coming.
Oh, Millie, I see you waiting. Do you want to pop in here?
Hi, everyone. Maybe I should share my screen. One sec. Hi.
Hey.
Nice to be here. It's evening here in London, so I just popped on. I kind of guess caught a little bit of what, sorry, I didn't know how to pronounce your name. Sitali, is that how to pronounce your name? Was saying about being proud of being Indigenous and everything. I think that's what you were saying. Well, you know, I don't know, for those who don't know me, I'm Milagros, and I'm from Peru. I'm a native Quechuan background, so I'm adopted. So I didn't grow up with my original birth family, but my birth family are Quechuan speakers, and they come from a small town in Puno, Curusillo. So I don't have, and here in the UK, we don't really have a conversation of like being proud of being Indigenous, or we don't have any history in terms of like, you know, a lot of native people here in the UK. So for me, my journey was always about, you know, how to explore what it means to be Indigenous. I grew up in my family are Caucasian. And so for me, my parents were really like on top of things, and you know, in understanding that I am Quechuan descent. And so we had lots of books about the Quechuan culture, and my parents had gone to Peru and understood some aspects of it. Obviously, they're not Peruvian, and they'll never understand what it means to be from a different race or a culture in that respect. But for me, certainly, I'm being very proud of being Indigenous, Quechuan. And when I was 18, I went back to Peru, and the whole journey was what it means to be with what it does. What does it signify for me having this face and having my culture living in the UK? So for me, it was really imperative that I go back to where my roots are. So at 18, I left England, and I explored the journey of what does it mean to be a Quechuan, you know, having Quechuan roots. At that time, I didn't know where my birth family was, but I did know that I was from Quechuan descent. So I think I've always been very proud to be Quechuan and Peruvian. You know, here people don't really know Quechuan, so I sort of just say Peruvian. And then I say, you know, like my birth family will speak Quechua, etc. So I try to educate people. But for me, it's always about bringing the two, because I've been brought up in an English culture, and I'm very English, but that doesn't mean that I should neglect my other side of who I am, which is Quechuan roots. So I go back to Peru quite often, once every 2 years. I try to submerge myself into the culture. And so for me, I would express myself in England to say that I am Peruvian, that I am proud of who I am. And I try to educate people in the context of the UK about why it's important for me to go back and to explore my roots, and try to educate them about for example, the struggles that my birth family had. You know, why couldn't I be kept within my own birth family, you know, and that how that sort of discussion unravels because they don't have the same means. Why don't they have the same means? And so it sort of goes like that, you know, slowly we sort of open up the conversation. So for me, in my context, I try to just explore that journey and try to sort of make people understand within their own like education and their own experiences. I think that's really important.
I was gonna say I watched that video with you and Marcus. You know, the 2-hour one. It was really great hearing about your journey. I was gonna say it was beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've often wondered. You know, talking with Marcus was so great because obviously he's adoptee like me, and he's American. So it was really interesting to converse about us, to contrast, to compare our experiences, and what it's like for us adoptees to grow up, and how do we process that loss, and how do we make amends, you know, because I think there's a deep sense of, for us, you know, that we need to know where we're from, and we need to sort of bridge all the holes in our being, and sort of try to make sense and try to forge ahead with as much information and with as much, you know, to arm ourselves, because, you know, like our birth families, at least my birth family, you know, my birth mother shouldn't have any access to education, didn't have any access to resources. So here I am in the UK. I don't even know if she knew I was like living in the UK, you know. So it's a world away from the life that she would have had.
So for me, it's really important for me to sort of like try to, I don't know what the word is, sort of like try to be at peace, but also try to do my best to speak on behalf of her, you know, because she's not with us today. She's died. She's dead. She's not here. She's dead. She's, you know, dead. So I always do my best to try to think about like how can I make her life a bit easier, you know, for her if she was living today, and therefore the people of the Quechuan people.
I always think that it's different, I guess, coming from us as Indigenous folk that are adopted as well, because there's a lot of soul searching. I think we do at certain stages of our lives. So nicely said, Millie.
Yeah.
I wanted to. Sorry.
No.
Oh, I was just going to say, Lakota Guy, you did ask for solutions, and I was just like diagnosing a problem. I think that what solution I would like to think of is, you know, how to bring those together is obviously get this sort of movement and thinking out to more people, those that are of, you know, Mexican and Central South American descent, but letting our fellow, you know, native Northern American brothers and sisters to know about this as well, and what we want to do for others. I think if they understand, like, we're here to help those that are, you know, going through some really difficult, you know, situations, like a lot of us, you know, in South America, you know, in Canada, all over, you know, are under attack by a government that doesn't care about us too much. And then also the other thing is like looking at this from the historical, you know, perspective of saying that, you know, why they say that we're such a minority, but we really aren't. Like, let's change something. Let's make history, because we aren't a small minority in these countries, in Guatemala and in Mexico and many others. And I think those times it's time to change that. Or we get a hold of Deb and get her on the podcast. Deb Holland, or is her last name Holland?
Yeah, it is.
Caitlin, yeah.
But I was kidding. I don't think. I mean, maybe one day we could get Deb.
No, we should get Yalitza Aparicio on this podcast, bro.
There you go.
You know, if I can add, I follow Mexican politics a lot, and there's been a recent campaign called Poder Prieto, which is, I don't know how to translate that, like dark skin power in Mexico. And it isn't until these last few years where now there's like a social campaign to expose like the racist hiring practices of Mexico. Like they actually did a survey and found out that 70% of Mexicans are considered darker skinned or brown skinned. And they did a basis the equity of Mexican, you know, mainstream media that is like they only represented like about 3%, 4% of the media represents those 70% dark skinned Mexicans. So that was really exciting for me to see. And what fuels this is the mestizaje concept that they are completely debunking right now in Mexico at the university level. So just wanted to share that.
No, I'm glad they are. I remember I haven't read the whole book. I wanted to see if I can get a physical copy because I'm going to Mexico in September. But Mexico Racista by Federico Navarrete. I'm gonna see if I can get a physical copy in Mexico. But yeah, he pulls out stats about how it's way more likely if you're white or lighter skinned to get a job. You know, he even pointed out this one study which I thought was crazy. So like in Mexico, they don't have indigenous dolls, right? They only have white dolls or mestizo dolls. So there's a study done. And they had this room full of kids, right, ranging from white, mestizo, and like indigenous. And they had a white doll, mestizo doll, and indigenous doll. They had to create the indigenous doll because those didn't exist. And they asked the kids, they're like, "Hey, which one is the best one?" And all of them, including the indigenous and really dark skinned kids, pointed to the white one. And they're like, "Okay, which one do you guys identify as?" And all the kids, even the dark skinned indigenous kids, pointed to the white doll. And when they asked the dark-skinned indigenous kids, "Hey, why are you pointing to the white doll?" They would come up with excuses like, "Well, the palms of my hands are a little lighter, and it kind of is similar to the doll." So they would try to like come up with an excuse. And I don't know if that's not sick brainwashing. I don't know what the fuck is, but I was like, Jesus, when I read that in that book, I was speechless.
I think it's I think it's time for us to destroy this false cultural construct of what indigenous is that a lot of people have in their brains of, and I think that's maybe what prohibits a lot of people reconnecting that. Oh, if I'm, just like the sister, I can't pronounce her name. I'm sorry. I'm very poor at understanding those type of names, but Sitlali, please help me out, Juan.
Yeah, Sitlali.
Sitlali, yeah. She pointed out brilliantly that this is an ongoing issue with our community down there, and it's this idea of, well, if I'm indigenous, that means they are cultists, they are anti-church, they are this and that, and but look, being indigenous in 2021 is people who are reconnecting. It's people from adoptive families that are finding their way back to their home. It's people that have always been connected that are helping others reconnecting. This indigenous identity is such a, we put it in such a monolithic term of this is what it means. This is what it means to be indigenous. It's not. We are living post-colonial, which means that we are indigenizing ourselves. I don't believe we can truly decolonize ourselves to what our ancestors were, but we can indigenize our mindset. And I think part of that is understanding that we all have separate and unique and also valid journeys to indigenizing ourselves. And we should always, help each other in that type of way and look at each other as being, voices to carry on the next generation of what it means. Because, this sister here from England, she's re-indigenizing herself with their Quechuan brothers and sisters, right? That means that the next generation from her are going to be even more connected than she was, and then so on and so on. So you won't have this identity. What did you call it, Juan? Was it last week? You said it was a imposter syndrome, right? Where you don't feel like you're really indigenous, or you're connecting, in a bad way or whatever. That will eventually go away once you have that confidence of knowing you're indigenous. And I think that takes in part of identifying that we are all, separately doing the same things, but equally doing the same things.
I have a question for you guys. I don't know, anyone. You talk about like what did you say? Imposter syndrome, and how our generation that will come after us will feel less. Like, so I mean, I'm kind of new to all of this, so please bear with me. But do you think it's essential for people to go back to really where Indigenous really started from, which is basically for example, for us, if we're from Latin America, to go back to Peru, to go back to Bolivia? Or do you think you can actually find it in where you are? Because I'm a bit two of minds, because for me, my journey was ultimately to go back to Peru time and time again. I've been there 14 times. So it's so I don't know, I'm of two minds, what can we get in the United States, England, as opposed to what we can actually get back into our native countries. So I don't know what people's thoughts are. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts about going back, etc.
If you don't mind, Juan and Marcus, I'd like to talk on that just real quick. Millie, I don't know if you know, but I'm Lakota, so I'm a Plains native, right? And my people are from present-day South Dakota, and we, have been living under a different type of oppression than others, right here. And our journey is a little bit different. I was born in the Black Hills, and that's where my people are ancestrally from. And that's where our creation story is from. So I'm pretty close to that. And for a lot of us, I think United States First Nations communities in Canada, we have, reservation systems, and those have been kind of hallmarks of us reconnecting. And the ability to go back to there and hear fluent speakers or be around fluent family members in our language and our culture and stuff, that's more easily accessible than someone like you or someone that is, say Indigenous on the Orinoco River, someone that is in those communities that are even more diverse, even more rare when it comes to language diversification. So I think, understanding that all of us have a different way and a way of reconnecting. For you, it probably will have to be, because I don't see a lot of, social media, and I don't see a lot of ways to, learn your language fluently and stuff online. So, and I think, authentically reconnecting, you need to go back to your homeland. That homeland is part of your blood. It's part of your soul. And if we think about our Indigenous thinking and pan-Indigenous thinking, where we are from, it matters to us. And that's what makes us indigenous. That's what differentiates us from everybody else, is that we have a relationship with a land that is sacred. And that is completely different than everybody else. So that's why it's important for us to reconnect and go back to those sacred areas, because only in those sacred areas that we could truly learn to reconnect, and we could truly understand what that soil feels like, what that smell feels like, what it looks around, what your ancestors saw. It's much like learning your indigenous language to fluency. When you learn your indigenous languages, you're doing multiple things of indigenizing your mindset, because language is a way of expressing how our ancestors saw the world. So for us, learning our language is so important, because it's a viewpoint into looking at how our ancestors saw the world and how we saw relationships with everything else. And I think that's really important to consider.
Thank you for that. I've often felt that the land is the reason why I go back. And I mean, shoot me now, but I really don't like Peruvian food. But I do love the Andes, and I do love the mountains. And that is what's constantly bringing me back. Even though my birth family is not bringing me back, it's the land. And it's really funny because, you know, I haven't really grown up with that concept. But as soon as I arrived in Peru, I just felt it within my being. And that was like, I didn't even speak a word of Spanish. Like, I'd never been outside of Europe, you know, when I was 18. So it was the land that was calling me back. So I do like what you're saying, Lakota Guy. I think it's like, you know, I think it's just an amazing journey. Like I'm not new to exploring my roots, but I am new to all of this kind of conversation, because, like I say, we don't have this kind of conversation like in the UK. So it's really interesting to hear people's perspectives, like Lakota and people who are living in the States, because you've got that kind of experience. You can go down to the reservation, you can talk with if you know, like your Americans, and you can see like where you all are in your journey, and you can learn from each other. I think that's super interesting. And it's such a learning experience and a tool for you guys to have that kind of like community kind of like on site. I guess my other question is, I know for you, Lakota Guy, you like based in USA, but for the other people, like, do you reclaim your like citizenships? Like, are you guys a Mexican and Americans, or how do you see that process?
So I was born in Mexico, so I have that, and I'm trying to get my American citizenship. I think people should get their Mexican citizenship, because it makes traveling back there easier, and you can obviously, you know, wherever your ancestors originate from, you actually can purchase like property if you're a Mexican citizen. If you're not, you can't. So I say it has a lot of benefits. Also, if you have Mexican citizenship, certain countries like Bolivia will let you travel there without a visa, so you can interact with more of your indigenous brothers and sisters without all the hassle. Because a lot of these indigenous countries don't like U.S. citizens, you know. So yeah,
and just to clarify, Millie, you know, me being in the United States, I'm actually a dual citizen. I'm a citizen of my Rosebud Sioux Nation, and I'm also a citizen of the United States. So I hold two citizenships, right? And that's I just wanted to be clear about that. That we're not literally American. We are on occupied territory, and we're a sovereign nation, dual citizenship. And I think what Juan said is really important. You know, in order to, you know, not only immerse yourself in your indigenous culture, you have to have those type of colonized rights of land and ownership and type of stuff to repatriate, because we're not gonna force them to repatriate. They're not ever gonna like voluntarily repatriate. We have to do it by force, and sometimes it's monetarily. You just have to buy the land back, man.
Yeah, I mean, eventually I might just go buy some land over in San Luis Potosí. But no, Millie, what you were saying about reconnecting to the land, absolutely. In September, so I've never been to San Luis Potosí. That's where, like, my ancestors come from a wide range of places. I've done the genealogy, but the vast bulk of them come from San Luis, because we're Guachichil. So I'm going in September to visit my tribe for the very first time. They're having an anniversary celebration in San Luis Potosí. And obviously they accept me as a member and they see me as a brother. But for me, it'll be real once I get off that plane and I go and shake their hands, give an embrace. And once I run my hands through that Guachichil sand in the desert, that's when I'll know it's real. So I definitely agree with you. Visiting holds a lot of power, so I can't wait to go walk the desert, you know, in September.
If I can add as well, Millie, you know, you present great questions that it's hard because, you know, so U.S. occupied, we don't tend to think of how outside natives look at us. So thank you so much for shedding light on your perspective and your questions. As far as navigating citizenship, I agree with Antoloa. It's I have dual citizenship as well, and I'm more aggressive about obtaining the Mexican citizenship because I'm really tired of seeing white people buying our land in Mexico and using it as vacation spots and completely gentrifying a lot of small Mexican towns. It's really, it boils my blood that our own people, because of NAFTA and all these trade, they migrate here, they migrate north, and yet you have all these white people, these wealthy older white people who are buying the heck out of lands using other Mexican nationals to do so. And that really boils my blood. So eventually, one day, my goal is to reclaim some of that land that my ancestors are from. And it's tough, because we're thinking about, yes, we're thinking about our philosophy, our ideology as indigenous people, but then you have the pressing reality of a colonial government that does exercise its political power, its financial power over us legally, right? Our bodies are read in this system through passports, through social security numbers. So it's like, how do we use that to our advantage, and how do we use that to indigenize spaces that are colonized again? Mexico is being recolonized, and it's ridiculous how I see this because I went to Cancun a few years back as well as Marcus did, and indigenous folks don't go to the clubs there. They don't shop in Cancun, the strip. You don't see native people. You don't see our people there, right? And I was like, what the heck am I doing here? Like, I felt really guilty for participating in a tourist spot. And then where I saw my people was when I had to leave Cancun. I had to leave those tourist spots. And so that really shed light to me, like, wow, like the realities that we live in Mexico, like really are portrayed in these tourist sites that exploit the heck out of our people, exploit the heck out of Mayan culture, and only use our people as backdrops, right? We're only used as tour guides, as exotic people that are seen for the convenience of tourists. And so, those are one of the things that I'm thinking. That's how I deal with the complexity, right, of saying U.S. national, American national. But it's like, let's use it to our advantage, and let's try to proclaim as much as we can of the land take back.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've often thought about what is how much effort, or how much what is our responsibilities, or how much investment monetarily or just time-wise do we actually spend within our own native lands? Because that's something I'm thinking about. I've often thought about and reflected on, like, I'm here in the UK, and it's like, obviously I was born and raised here and I have all my education here. And it's something I've like, where do I put my time and energy into in the next 20 years? What am I going to do with it? What kind of responsibility do I want to have in regards to how I see Peru? I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and it's something I feel very passionate about. But it's like a balance game. Where do I put my effort in, and how would I go about going back to Peru, for example, and working within the local communities? Obviously, I actually was brought up with my Peruvian passport. I'm a little bit odd in that way. I was brought up with my Peruvian passport. I only became British as an older person. So I have a little reverse kind of syndrome going on there. But nevertheless, it's something I'd like to know more people's experiences, or like solutions or whatever. Like, being raised abroad, how do we navigate this discussion of like putting our effort and time into? Do we put it into England, the US, or do we put it into our native communities? How do we engage with all that? Anyone?
I think it is, sad that these governments do sell out, to American corporations, especially in Mexico. I wanted to add on to that really quick. But it's hard because I don't know what the solution. I mean, you can protest as much as we want, but I think the big thing that needs to be done is, like I said, getting these types of movements out to enough people to where we'll have our own, representatives or those that want to go in to the administrative, government circle with similar views such as us, such as this. I think that is one way in how we can make a change. Even in the United States as well, like if we got someone that believed that, indigenous people are like from, many countries, and that these labels that have been placed upon us are designed, and in my view, to erase, indigenous identity, then I think that there could be big change in the future for us, coming together, more people. And I think what I want to see is like those that aren't native to see how we view things through our lens, like the colonial term of mestizo, the culture that, as I say, that is not designed to praise indigenous identity. So I think the more people we get that see these sort of things, the more good that we can do for the world, for indigenous people. Again, because the goal, I think, is to come together and then, bring upon a new change for us. And that change can be in economic ways, just, I think, getting the word out is what we want right now. We are in those stages. So,
hey Marcus, first of all, I want to just take a point of clarity and just give it up for the shirts, man. Today's shirt, last week's shirt, just phenomenal, man. That's just, I'm so jealous. That's a sweet shirt, man. I like it. It looks indigenous, brother.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually got this shirt. I was gonna bring this up at the end, but yeah, I got this shirt from Laura and Dina on Instagram. Do a little shout out. She's a really great person and owns, a lot of indigenous, made shirts. So whoever wants to contact her, I'll put it in the channel description. So
I got a poncho from her. Yeah, she sells excellent merchandise, man.
Yeah, she sells a lot of great indigenous merchandise. So yeah, I love these types of shirts. I liked it so much. I got another one. This one's white, and yeah, it's pretty comfortable too.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And what you said is so powerful, Marcus, because we talk about points of solidarity. And I think that's one thing I really love about this podcast and the people that you bring in here is that we can talk north and south of like, okay, what are our opportunities for boots on the ground activism, right? And part of that for northern indigenous people like myself and other allies, is being involved with resisting policies that are detrimental to indigenous people in Mexico and Central and South America. Things like the North American Free Trade Agreement, Central American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, CAFTA. These things need to be vastly rejected by the indigenous movements because we need to recognize that these are exploitative of indigenous populations in these areas. And I think that if we can have that solidarity with our, Southern indigenous brothers and sisters to help us coordinate those efforts and coordinate those campaigns to lobby these, politicians to say, hey, enough's enough of exploitative labor with these countries, because exactly what you're saying. You have Honda, you have Chinese companies, you have American companies that go down there and exploit cheap labor and then put a sticker on it, because NAFTA, people understand NAFTA covers things like saying that it's American made when in fact everything was made in like Central America or in Mexico, when in fact when they think American made, they put the American flag on it, right? We're not talking about just like America as the general nomenclature. We're talking about nationalistic Americans. So this is hoodwinking American consumers, but at the same time exploitative to indigenous people, and that's a point of solidarity, and that gets me excited. And it gets me excited because I think about things, like I said last week, that I'm personally fighting for, which is a international treaty council of Northern and Southern indigenous people to once again go back to the United Nations and ask them to implement the 1948 genocide convention and censor the United States in its genocide, which it's fulfilled every obligation of genocide towards indigenous people, and with that have the power of autonomy and sovereignty, true sovereignty of 574 federally recognized tribes. And what we're going to be doing with that is that we are going to be deporting these people in ICE detention centers towards reservations and create small housing, create educational opportunities for them, and make sure that they have a safe, clean place to live on our reservations that are completely autonomous, so that they're able to get their feet on the ground and then go back to their countries armed with a little bit of capital and a little bit of motivation to really change the system.
Yeah, that's perfect. I loved everything that you said about that. And that's what I am like. I'm fine with, crapping on the conquistadors all day, but eventually we have to have solutions. I don't like to be the type of person to victimize myself. I want things done. That's who I am. And that's why I have this podcast set up. I want action to be taken place. And, I love the fact that a lot of people have came on, and even non-native people that really support us too. I love that as well. So what you said was really powerful. But here's another thing though, but should we look at the United Nations as someone that I hope that there are people there that support us, but I have my, issues. I hope, understandably, with the United Nations as well. They did support the Fujimori sterilization of indigenous rural Peruvians. So yeah, I wonder how we should view, the United Nations, because I don't know. What are your thoughts, Lakota Guy, on them?
Well, you don't have to like the donkey to get him up the hill, right? That's how I think about the United Nations. Like, we're gonna strap it with everything we want to do, put it on top of the hill, get it to complete autonomy and sovereignty. Because look, the United Nations is in a particular position to be able to be an independent government of change. And if we were to appeal to the United Nations and appeal to countries that have lived through, genocide and have lived through, indigenous exploitation, and say, hey, enough's enough, we can garner enough support to censor the United States. And if we can get to the point of actually censoring the United States, that is a political win for a lot of us. That's a political win to talk about. Look, if we don't achieve full autonomy and sovereignty, which, look, I live in the real world. It's an uphill battle. I mean, we need probably 10 million more of us that are literally educated and activists and ready to go and talk to and write to our legislatures to get another seat. In 1977, we did it. In 1977, that tells you right there that we as Indigenous people got to the UN. We Indigenous people put it in front of their face, and we could do it again in a better way. And if we could go to something like censorship, or just telling the United Nations, hey, this is what's happening, maybe they'll change their policy and say, hey, Indigenous people are uprising, they're being united, so we got to stop things like ICE detention centers and exploitive policies that hurt our Indigenous communities, and even goofy things like these visas, these labor visas that are inherently exploitive still, because you don't get to vote. You don't get to be part of the culture. You don't get to be part of the system that is benefiting from your labor work. So, I mean, we need to think about ourselves like that. But again, it requires us to indigenize thinking. It requires us to harshly look at the status quo and say we need things to change. So how do we appeal to these field workers? How do we appeal to them and say, hey, you need to get on board with indigenizing your mindset and being an activist, so that we can change things, because that's the only way we can do it.
Yeah, right. And that's why I say, getting more people on board with this movement. And I think one thing I look at, though, again, is like how we get an agreed consensus amongst tribes to want to do this as well, like from Apache to Lakota and Cherokee. I think that it's doable, definitely. But I know that it would take a lot of work, but, we have people dying. So I don't see why we can't come together on this right now, dying in the ICE detention centers that were supposed to be.
Another reason why I think that when I put forward my what I think is a good strategy, convincing all the Mexican Americans, Chicanos, that they're indigenous first as the first stepping stone, the first base, is because then it allows us to turn our immediate support to you, Lakota Guy, to you indigenous peoples that are here in the U.S. and to vote in your favor and to get those treaties upheld, because they've been broken time and time again. So now you'll have millions of more backers supporting you, right? So that's why I view it kind of like as that strategic push. You establish that base here. You get everybody solidified behind one banner, and then you push south. And one by one, they fall.
Yeah, you know what's really encouraging, bro, is that, we're seeing, even in non-Indigenous circles, a distrust of the Democratic Party. And I know it's going to shock a lot of people that, wow, they're not that great to Indigenous people, right? And both of them have been exploitive to Indigenous people, both Republicans and Democrats. So, I think we need to decentralize ourselves from a political, from these colonial political organizations like Democrat, Republican, whatever, and literally go issue by issue. Because look, we have cultural differences, let's just be honest. A lot of the Ponca, Pawnee Nation, Cherokee Nation are culturally more conservative than Lakota people are. We are a little bit more culturally liberal, when it comes to things, and they are more culturally, conservative. So, but if we could say, hey, as an Indigenous united front, we can go issue by issue instead of partisan, issues that literally distract us, right? And that, I think that's the power of, indigenizing a movement that's independent of partisanship. Because what's happening right now is that Deborah Haaland, as much as I love her and I love her being in the, the Secretary of Department of Interior, but we need to also have allies on both of them to end things like, the private prison industry, which, disproportionately affects, quote unquote Mexican community, Indigenous communities, disproportionately affects the nuclear Indigenous family, labor movements, this goofy, like, border wall talk and all this stuff. I mean, in order for us to achieve anything, we need more of us, A. B, we need to look at a central front that's nonpartisan. That's B. And then C, also be politically active and hold our representatives accountable of it. Right now in Minnesota, we have Peggy Flanagan, and she is our lieutenant governor, right? And she's, Anishinaabe, she's Indigenous, and we were like, rah, that's great, But when it comes to like an oil pipeline going through, tribal areas where they depend on water, up there, if they don't have water, they'll literally die. So we have her up there, and she's being completely silent. She's being completely okay with Joe Biden saying, okay, you can complete the pipeline, right? This is exactly what we have in front of us. We have Indigenous people with good intentions going and achieving their political successes, but at the same time, completely erasing their, their activism of focusing on Indigenous issues, like getting rid of the pipeline, like holding Biden responsible for exactly what he's doing, holding, Trump and Obama responsible. And that's the issue we have going forward, man. That's all we need more of us. And I agree, Juan.
I didn't know you were a Minnesotan.
Was that? Yeah, yeah. We call it occupied Dakota Makoche, which is occupied Dakota land.
Nice. Very cool. I think who was the controversial governor that was there? Ventura?
Ventura, yeah. Yeah, he was independent. Yeah, he wore a fringe jacket, like a Jimi Hendrix fringe jacket, and he said he had some Cherokee ancestry.
He's an interesting man.
Yeah. Some things he's good at. Some things he's like, holy crap! Talk about a tinfoil hat, right?
Right. Yeah. I've heard him say some things. I mean, I think. Well, we can bring him up in another time.
I wanted to add a few thoughts. Sorry, I'm with my son over here listening to everything, but I really enjoy the talk about politicizing our population, because there's this really self-defeatist idea going around that we can't participate in the political process, screw the political process. But at the same time, it's like, well, then what do we do, right? And it's like, until we have a substantial alternative government to how we're going to govern ourselves, it's like we have to do that. And I really like the perspectives that, Lakota Guy is presenting and Juan Choloa, because it's like, how do we politically influence the Native Nations, United Nations. Yes, we're not in agreement. They have failed us. They have exploited our populations. But it's like, how do we use our power? And first of all, by the identity issue, once we identify as Indigenous, there's a more conscientious effort and more united effort to make sure that we become visible, because we're invisible. A lot of Mexicans, Central Americans, South Americans, we're the invisible natives that are not being accounted for, that are not putting pressure on these governments. And so I really appreciate when we start thinking about how do we politicize this movement and get real changes in our lifetime. Because yes, eventually we'll become free, eventually our descendants will be free, but how do we start changing the policies now that are killing our people now, that are starving our people now? And so I think it's really, really important that we have this conversation, and I am loving it and I really appreciate it, because I come across that all the time. Oh, why this? And why do you care? And why are we calling governors? They don't care about us and they don't care about, and it's like, so what do? Nothing? We're quick to complain. Oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. Why do we do this? But it's like, no, there's tangible things we can do right now in our power that could really result in some change, something. We have to look at small examples, small progress, and it's like it's all building for our autonomy, for our sovereignty as Native people at a continental level. But it starts somewhere. When there's massive changes, it doesn't start massively. There's always those small little stabs at this monster of occupation, and that's how we're going to take it down. So I am really enjoying this. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, thank you. That's just what I earnestly believe. Like I said, it's what makes sense strategically speaking. We're already here, like a bunch of Mexican Americans. We just need to get them to change their minds and to start thinking like Indigenous people, reclaim that. And then, our northern brothers and sisters right now are struggling with their treaty rights. So it's like, then we focus on that. We solve that problem, and then we can, as a united front, then tackle all the other issues. Because if you try to take everything on at once, you're going to fail. I say you got to pick your battles.
And when those changes start happening, you'll start seeing more and more people will catch on. Like the United States is like the most powerful country in the world, in my perspective. We're literally next to Central and South America. You don't think there's going to be changes going throughout there as well? You're already seeing it with the statues coming down. Like if we start, having these types of Indigenous movements and really putting our power into in politics, then you'll see change more.
Oh yeah, but we're not even alone down in South America though. Because if we had New Amauta here, he could expound more. But Bolivia, the way that they're structuring their government, the way they their policies, right? We could take notes from them. So we're definitely not alone in this. We just have to consolidate here first.
Think about this, guys. Like, the quote unquote, new labor, they call it in the United States, all these derogatory terms, new labor, immigrant dollar is literally changing the brands that we're buying in the United States, and we're having more and more of these Mesoamerican brand names in Target and Walmart, right? So the power of the indigenous dollar is great, especially when it comes to, people coming up here, industrial workers, food line workers, all these new folks coming up here because of oppression in their own communities. So we take those dollars, right? We indigenize these people, take those dollars. Right now, I have a friend that's in Las Vegas with the National Indian Gaming Convention, right? This is a multi-billion-dollar industry of indigenous money going in and out. The Shakopee-Bingwakatan Sioux community here, about an hour away from me, they pull in about $90,000 a month per person. They get $90,000 a month per cap. The Pachinga Nation in LA gets about $80,000 a month per person. If we could convince maybe 2, 3, 4 of them to dedicate maybe a couple $1 million to fund an indigenous movement and a renaissance, that would be powerful, and also direct a lot of this quote unquote new money to indigenous causes. That is literal political power that can be harnessed to change everything. We're talking boots on the ground activism, changing things today, saying, hey, we need this bill cut. We need this bill cut. We want this bill to go through. We're talking about DACA, NACA, all these other policies that are, achieving citizenship of people coming through here. We need that to happen. So we're going to use our dollar in our power in order to do it. But if we can unite that Southern dollar, indigenous dollar, and the tribal Indian gaming dollar together, it's unstoppable what we can do.
I'm loving the ideas.
Oh yeah. Well, one thing I also wanted to bring up is one idea Lakota Guy had, like, in the last live that it just resonated with me so much. It's just like, and that's why I'm like, we help each other out, and favor for a favor, right? But he was saying that even with these, Southern Indigenous people that are crossing the border, imagine it if like the Lakota Nation or other nations were to just get these people, bring them to the tribal reservation, and hey, you can't deport them. They're here on our sovereign land, and then you help these people out, right? You give them the tools that they need. So I think that would be powerful too. This is a political outcry, right, against the deportation, against all that.
A lot of good comments too.
Yeah, I'm really liking the comments as well. Yeah, it's I think everything's starting to catch on.
But it's a time to be excited, family. It's a time to get active, to get involved in your community. It's time now to get boots on the ground things. We could talk ethereals, we could talk trauma. And look, I'll be honest, what we're battling here in Northern Indigenous communities is this residual dialogue of trauma-based topics. And we always talk about it, boarding school, genocide, like all those things happen, right? But what can we do for the seventh generation? What can we do going forward? What can we do to indigenize our communities and talk about reclaiming who we are? And I think a lot of this, I call it trauma talk, is important. I'm not trying to invalidate that, but at the same time, we need solution-based discussion. We need discussion with everyone talking about, okay, so what do we do in the next couple months? What can we do in the next 6 months? What is our outcome from that point? Because the rhetoric of just oppression talk, and it leads us to oppression Olympics with other oppressed communities. I mean, we see that with other POC communities. They're talking about oppression all the time as well. So we need to get out of this and it's a colonizer tactic, right? It's like, let's oppress them, and then all they have to do is literally try to find their way out of this bucket. Well, let's forget about the bucket. Let's talk about what we can do to get out of it.
I agree. I see a lot of that too. And gotta come with solutions. I don't like being stuck. So how you feel that there's a lot of your Lakota, brothers and sisters maybe would agree also that, there are obviously, indigenous people south of the U.S. border as well, and like how their view of Hispanics, so-called Hispanics, I will say.
You're gonna get me in trouble on TikTok here with this, but yeah. So look, I'm just gonna say it, and I don't care whatever. If I get deleted off TikTok, I'll just whatever. I'll join you guys every week or whatever, right? So
yeah, you can join Indigenous podcast, bro.
This will be the new Lakota Guy TikToker.
VIP guest.
I'll have to get a shirt too or a poncho.
Yeah, permanent guest.
Yeah. That's like a second prize, right, of a foot race. But anyway, this is an issue we have in Indian country, and I say Indian, and I don't mean disrespect for those that don't identify as Indian, but that's just what I grew up with, right? So in our communities, in Plains Indigenous circles and in Northern Indigenous circles, we have absolutely no issue with Mesoamerican Southern Indigenous brothers and sisters. I have never met another Lakota that is disparaging or somehow looks at Southern, even, Mexican Americans that come up here like, wow, they're Indigenous too. It's like they're Indigenous, but we can't say anything about it, right? Because they're all, pro-nationalism when we talk to them. So, but we're like, we recognize they're Indigenous. And I think as this is where I'm gonna get in trouble, when you go Southern states like the Navajo Nation or the Ute, Pueblo, all these other nations that are border nations, there's a lot of adversarial, antagonistic mindsets with those indigenous nations towards Mesoamericans and towards Mexicans, because they there's a lot of history there, right? We don't have history with them, but they do, right? So you're talking about skirmishes, family, someone's auntie married this dude and the auntie cheated on that, so like it's even to that micro level of aggression, right? So when we think about, and we always get pigeonholed, the Lakotas, like, oh, this northern aggression towards Mesoamerican brothers and sisters. What it is that it's our southern indigenous relatives are closer to, Mesoamerican communities that have, I think, that have more of an antagonistic behavior. As far as, what we see as in my community, in my nation, in, the Shoshone, Arapaho, in Northern Cheyenne communities, I think for us, we just want to get out of the box. We're done. We're sick and tired of where we are right now, and we will do anything that's necessary for us to unite with whoever indigenous we need to do for the betterment of all of our people, because we see the writing on the wall, man. I mean, you look at Cherokee Nation, right? Like, a lot of them aren't learning their language. A lot of them aren't doing what they're doing. A lot of them are lineal descent by like 1%, not to brush up on the blood quantum stuff, but at the same time, I mean, we're being erased at a disproportionate matter. So do we now actively seek repatriation, or do we wait for our grandkids to do it? And for us, I would rather, partner with whoever is down for the cause than deal with microaggressions and lateral violence towards our communities together.
Yeah, I saw that too, like where, well, no, I think Marcus, you ran into somebody that was like maybe one of those southern border type of nations.
He was
that
a Navajo,
like,
I remember.
Well, no, the one on the YouTube comment that absolutely like hated Mexicans, like, but I mean,
Yeah.
I recognize there's like an ugly history that happened with the Mexican government, but again, it goes back to the causes. Why did that happen? It happened because the Spaniards took Tlaxcalans up with them, and they pushed north, and they started trying to invade these places and started trying to wipe people out. And they used their indigenous warriors that were, thinking that they could take advantage of the Spaniards, or that were just misguided as hell. I mean, that the Tlaxcalans were misguided as hell. But, I understand the bad blood, but, that happened centuries ago. In order to fix the problems for today, we need to band together. We can't hold on to those grievances. And not and they should, it's not all Mexicans that did that. Like the Huachichil didn't take part in that. We fought the Spaniards bravely, and we actually halted them. I mean, we were never defeated militarily. They ended up having to pay us off to be peaceful because we were that badass. But so we tried, right? We should have just said fuck the peace and pushed down in Mexico City and ran the Spaniards out, but we didn't. So we lost that opportunity. But yeah, I mean, it's just, we just got to let things go. Like if we want to band together as far as that, and that's easier said than done. But I mean, me and Marcus have run into people that are, from those southern border nations, and some of them, yeah, they really hate Mexicans. So there's others that don't. Like Phoenix, she was on here the last live. She's Apache. She doesn't hate Mexicans, but
yeah. If I can speak to that as well, because as far as the Mexican issue, and I was guilty of this too, because it's like I'm always trying to think of ways to connect with our native relatives here on the northern side. And one of the things that I started doing was not just land acknowledgements, right? But it's like I started thanking our northern relatives. In a lot of my classes and a lot of my talks, I say, I want to thank our northern relatives for hosting us. I want to thank our northern relatives for having us here. And to acknowledge, it's like, yes, this is our land as a collective indigenous folk, but it's like, we have to be mindful that it's like, yes, this is northern relatives. They are hosting us. So to me, once I started including that in my address and my talk, I really noticed a lot more positive interactions, which they have been by far. But I've always noticed that, like, oh, you guys are claiming this is your land, this is Aslan, and we can get into the whole thing Aslan because that's fake and whatever. But the whole idea of their land rights being overlooked by Mexicans who are reclaiming and reconnecting, I understand it, and I'm very sensitive to that, because we don't want to do that. We don't want to reimpose a land argument over our relatives who are here already. So that's one of the ways that I try to address that and say, no, like, we're thankful. We're thankful for you hosting us. We're thankful for that you've allowed us to be here and share space with you on your part of this land, right? And so anyway, so I think starting in a point of gratitude an important acknowledgement, has been very helpful. And also, like Conchaloa, like you're saying, a lot of the nations that are on borders, right? I've experienced the opposite, where they're trying their best to see how they can help our people, especially those that are considered undocumented. It's like, how do they best help those that are being criminalized and looked at by ICE? And so that's always been very refreshing as well, that most of the times they know that we're Native more than we know ourselves. And so that's something that I really appreciate, how they overlook our people's ignorance, and they see, no, you're Native. And you got our people saying, no, we're Hispanic, we're Latino. And then they're like, no, like, you're really Native. So I've always appreciated that they've taken on that conversation when they're trying to intercept between ICE and the government trying to deport our people. But then they're saying, no, you're our relatives. This is your land. You belong here. And so there's been a lot of talk about how, like Lakota Guy, like you're saying, how do, reservations, how do unceded territories assist our people. And I'm very grateful for that.
Seat Lali, I had a question for you, actually, sister. I have just been educated within the last couple years on the 80s and 90s Mexica movement. And that Mexica movement was based in this pan-indigenous movement that everyone's, quote unquote, Aztec, etc. And I'm assuming that you've probably lived a lot through that old Mexica movement and to where you are today, right? When it comes to indigenous identity, what lessons do you think was learned from that pan-indigenous movement, and what did you take out of that? If you could talk a little bit about that.
This is very interesting. I was a member of the Mexica movement for 20 years, actually. I was a spokesperson of the Mexica movement for 20 years. I left in 2017 for a lot of issues like misogyny and verbal abuse. But as far as the good things that I've learned, there was a lot of attempts. The movement did grow, did transform itself on various occasions, trying to, indigenize our people. First, it was very Mexican-centric. Then it expanded and saying, no, Mexican Central American. Then it expanded saying Mexican Central American, South American. And so it went through, we went through a lot of changes, right? And as far as the pan-indigenous perspective, I think the failed attempt happened when we were trying to use the term Nicantlaca. We were using that as as an alternate term to Latino, saying, okay, no, this is a pan-indigenous term for those who are reconnecting, who don't know what their nation is yet, who don't know where their tribe is yet. This is something you can use for now until that is determined. So at least you have something to reject Latino from, Hispanic from. And I think one of the things that radicalized me as a member of the Mexica movement before was to be very vocal and to be very political. We did a lot of sit-ins. We did a lot of campaigns. I learned how to write press releases. I learned how to deal with the police. I learned how to tester. How do you call a campaign? How do you get people into office? How do you get people out of office? So, the influence of the Mexica movement, for whatever my differences were and why I ended up leaving, it was very radical at that time. And we were doing the best we could with what we knew at that time. And like, for example, Mexica, a lot of people have a problem with that. Like, oh, it's Mexica-centric. Not everyone is Mexica. Well, in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have DNA testing. We didn't have, besides the Maury Povich show, like, it was really expensive. Not everyone could just go get a DNA test. And so that was that era of trying to, reclaim something that was the zenith of a culture that we have been kept from, and that's part of the things that I reflect on and I look back on and say, wow, like, what can we succeed where I noticed that we were short-handed from? Like, we did work with a lot of, indigenous groups here in the North, a lot of powwows, a lot of meetings. But at the same time, there's a lot more that we could have done. And, I don't know what happened to the Mexica movement. I haven't been involved for 4 years now or so. But those are the big takeaways. It's like, we can't deny the historical impact the movement had. We can't deny how a lot of people were radicalized through the Mexica movement. There's a lot of bad things that we can say, and if people are interested, I have that. That's not the platform to do it, but that's something I'm going to be very grateful for. It's like, not Hispanic, not Latino. That campaign was they launched it in 1995. Very aggressive. They boycotted. They protested Spanish-speaking media. They were talking about not mestizo, not raza. Not a lot of people were doing that. Not a lot of people were being challenging of the term mestizo. They're the ones that put it in the forefront, included it in the narrative of protest. And so that's one of the biggest things, right? That the Mexica movement has that legacy. And, hopefully all of us, I am continuing in the way that I can. I learned a lot and I'm continuing to grow, but that's one of the biggest things I think that I've learned from the movement that contributed is visibility. Protesting Disneyland, for example, like how do you protest multi-million-dollar companies and connect it to the issue of indigeneity, connect it to the issue of identity. And so it made it very, very, I think real. How do you get political now with an idea as ancient as the Olmec, right? How does that become real in politics today? And I think the lesson of the Mexica movement is that we can politicize, we can create visibility, and that we have a lot of power in how we are described in the media, in identity. And the biggest thing is the dismantling of Hispanic and Latino. For sure, for sure. I don't know if that answered Lakota Guy, but that's what I think.
I celebrate that. You know who really indigenized me a little bit on that was Kurly Tlapoyawa, and he's I got to know him quite well, and he's awesome archaeologist. I'm sure you guys probably have heard of him every now and again, but he's awesome, and he talked about the movement and really what it meant to be in that movement and the lessons learned and stuff like that. And what I consider it is for my personal story, my family was intimately involved with the American Indian movement in 1973, 1972 in Rapid City and the Black Hills. And the American Indian movement is heavily influenced by the Lakota Nation. I mean, that's where a lot of this militant behavior kind of started at, right? After the Red Power movement, of course, in Alcatraz, and then coming out of the Red Power movement in 1968 to what it was in 1973, 1974. And exactly what you said about the Mexica movement, the American Indian movement in the late 70s, unfortunately, was steeped in egotism and centered in, a lot of that toxic behavior. But again, lesson learned, right? And what it did, much like the Mexica movement, for all the toxicity, what it spurred is this resurgence and renaissance of indigenous identity and being proud to be indigenous, being proud to be American Indian, being proud to be part of that, I think that was one of the most pinnacle things about it. I want to talk about something about in the comments as well, if you guys don't mind, about the African American situation with the Juneteenth mural. So I actually had a conversation with a Mesoamerican brother, with one of the committee members with that mural in Galveston, Texas, the nonprofit that worked with that artist. So the issue with that is, and Daniel, thank you for bringing that to our attention in here. And there is a petition online that you guys could fill out to demand the removal of the Olmeca statue. For those that don't know, Galveston, Texas is a big town in Texas. And I'm sure you guys in Texas could talk about it a little bit more than I can. But tourism actually goes to southern Mexico, comes back up, and they drop them back out in Galveston. And these are people that went to Leventon, saw the Olmec head and stuff, and they come back and they see a mural, and it looks like, oh, hey, it's an Olmec, and it looks like it's part of the African diaspora. So this is an issue. What this is that it's something called ethnocentric pseudo erasure of our culture, right? And what it is it's cultural hijacking, and all of us need to be aware and perceive this as a clear and present danger of native erasure when it comes to Olmeca. We've seen it with our Mayan brothers and sisters. They look at some of these ancient paintings of them in black and say, hey, they're African American, right? Oh, they got dreads, right? And especially with the Olmeca statues, they look at maybe 3 of them. I mean, there is a vast variety of Olmec statues, and most of them look, like us here. A lot of them don't have the wide nose features, but those wide nose features are still prevalent in southern Mexican people. And these people are literally trying to erase our identity. And people like, and it's a clear and present danger because people like Ice Cube believes in that. KRS-One talks about that. I mean, this is not, just a bunch of small time people. This is like, stars are talking about that. We was here. We was always here. So this is a clear issue that we need to be cognizant of.
Lakota Guy, could you, once this live is finished, on the regular comment section, do you think you could drop that link to that petition? We'll go ahead and pin that comment so people can go sign it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, man. Yeah, that's and Kurly Tlapoyawa, yeah, in his podcast he really destroys this whole Avocentric argument. But I just can't believe people buy it. It's so frustrating to see that it's even a debate. It's just so stupid and asinine, honestly. Like it's I don't know, it's unbelievable, man. That's even a freaking debate.
Yeah, and it goes to add to, the Mayans came from the aliens, or that we are the lost tribes of Israel. Like, seriously, what happened at Indigenous Peoples March in 2019, I don't know if you all heard how our elder, I forget his name right now, but he was insulted heavily by these white youth. But what the media did not cover was that there was a lot of lost tribes of Israel there who are very anti-Indigenous, who are very oh my goodness, it's a very toxic group. They were making fun of native chants. They were actually there trying to say that we're the lost tribes of Israel, but they were disrespecting a native sister who was doing native chanting. And they were like, oh, that's all demonic and that's all Satanist. And so the fight that happened before those white youth went up and disrespected our elder was that, right? And lost tribes of Israel, we can count on this list. And I've been doing this for 24 years. These people are not going anywhere. I'm like, how do they keep getting so much momentum? And just like Lakota Guy says, they're getting a lot of mainstream support. A lot of mainstream celebrities are jumping on this bandwagon. And I get hit up all the time. Why don't you talk about it? Why don't you talk about it? I'm like, I've talked about it for 24 years. Like, this is just another attack on our ancestral rights to our civilizations. Oh, it adds to the racism. Oh, you guys were too stupid. You guys could not have created a civilization on your own. It must have been the aliens. It must have been Lost Tribe of Israel. It must have been Atlantis. It just adds to the fire of anti-Indigenous rhetoric that's out there. And these murals, like, there's a lot. These are the ones that we know of, but there's people that are using this in the classrooms. There's Chicano studies professors who are talking about this in their classrooms and promoting these ideas. So it's not just Africans that are doing this. A lot of our own people are buying into this idea. And it's like, it's ignorance. It's not understanding basic anthropology. It's not understanding the human diversity, just like you guys were all talking about in the beginning. Our landmass, our continent is the most diverse continent in the world. We have the most phonetically diverse populations that you can find in the world. Zooming in on phenotypes to represent a civilization and who authored that civilization is very simple-minded, it's very ignorant, and it completely ignores Indigenous autonomy, our own right to our heritage, and the fact that we created this ourselves. People cannot accept that. People are so ignorant and racist against our people that they will find any excuse to discard our ancestral intelligence and our creativity. So, but yeah, no, absolutely. We got to sign petition. Thank you for raising that, Lakota Guy.
My brain hurt when they say we was here.
Dude, like in the stupid like wet plate photography, it's just like how do you? It's just so dishonest. Like it's so obvious. I don't know how it's not obvious to all these people that really buy this bullshit. It's like if you use wet plate photography on me, I would look like I'm a black guy. It's like, but you guys know that would be ridiculous. That would be preposterous.
What would compel other Indigenous people to want to support that?
Well, I mean, it's sad. It's sad, Marcus. It's, but I've seen, man, it's so sad. I see brothers that are part of this BHI, Black Hebrew Israelite movement. They're saying we're the, tribe of Gad and tribe of Shem and all this stuff. And, it's just, it's a radical cultist movement. But the clear and present danger, especially with the Moorish Institute, if you guys remember those 11 militant people that got arrested over the 4th of July weekend, those were part of the Moor Uprising. And if you go to the mooruprising.org, if you go down to their origin, they say they come from the Olmec, that the Olmec is part of their society. So, and these are African-American militant people with guns saying that they're going to assert their sovereignty in the United States because they're part of the Olmeca culture. So, we talk about this and like, man, it's almost absurd, but when you have people like Ice Cube and Waka Flocka and the Breakfast Club, which is a very popular, you know, YouTube channel, promoting this type of, you know, pseudoscience, it is lateral violence. And, you know, what would they do if we were committing lateral violence? If we said the dashiki was indigenous, or that we had boats that sailed to, you know, Africa and educated the Egyptians on building pyramids? That's exactly what they do. They say the pyramids were, you know, all built by, you know, these seafaring Masa Munsa funded people, and it's not the case.
Oh, one thing is like that I've run into where some people are afraid to call this out because they'll be afraid of being labeled racist. I absolutely disagree. We being labeled racist. Just stating facts is not, you know, it's not racist. I will never hold my punches on this whole Olmec shit. They can label me racist if they want. I'm not being racist. They're being racist against us for saying that our people are not smart enough to have what we had, to have the technology we had. So they're the ones being fucking racist, not the other way around. That's just gaslighting shit. So I'm not going to pull my punches on that shit, and neither should anybody else. Like, they are way out of line with that shit.
Yeah, if they want to continue to be idiots, then they're going to see what a savage Indian looks like pretty soon. I won't hold punches either.
No, and I want to make clear too that a lot of times it's like, just because you expose it and denounce it, people think, oh, you're being anti-Black. There's a difference. Defending our culture, heritage, who we are as Native folks, is defending who we are. It's not being anti-Black. Now, there are people who are anti-Black who will strictly jump on the bandwagon of this debate to further prove their anti-Blackness and to justify their anti-Blackness. So those are the two things that I come across. It's people who are seeing it, oh, you're anti-Black. It's like, no, I'm not anti-Black. I'm anti-lies. I'm anti-racism, right? But then on the other side of the token, you have people who are anti-Black and who are loving this. They are loving this, saying, you see, that's what I told you. That's exactly why I don't like Black people. This is what they're doing. So that's what we're looking at. And I've come across that a lot, especially people who use this whole, you know, African Olmec heads, Pan-Africanism, to say, oh, see, that's why I don't like Black people. You see, that further proves why Black people X, Y, and Z, and they take it to the whole other level. So I want to bring attention to that, because that is ridiculous how people are doing it. It's opportunists who are trying to use it for their already hatred to certain races, to certain people, and they're using our people, they're using these debates to justify themselves. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Right, like, yeah, I mean, I agree. So there's a big difference between defending our heritage and then there's also going beyond that and then insulting Black people or demonizing them. That's completely different, you know. So I'm sure anyone that's intellectually honest can spot the difference. And those people in our own communities that are actually anti-Black and they hate Black people, it's like they shouldn't be contributing to this discourse at all. They need some introspection, right, to be able to get over that. Because I've run into some of that too in the Mexican community, where I've noticed that they don't like Black people. Some people don't. Like, I'm not saying a bunch or even the majority, but there's some that don't. Which I'm just like, dude, like, we're both minorities. Like, stop being so divisive.
I mean, but if we don't speak up for this and defend our identity, who's going to do it for us, right? Because, you know, we're not going to wait to the white man to do it. They don't care, because they were trying to push this Sulturian theory that Europeans came to the Americas before indigenous people. They were literally trying to do the same thing until it got completely debunked with DNA. So, I mean, we think about this is colonizer tactics, right? And when we think about ethnocentric pseudo theories like the Olmec were Black and, you know, Van Sertima, they came before Columbus, Leo Weiner, you know, all these real goofy people, you know, this is the type of things that we need to come ahead and say, hey, you know, as a oppressed community, we need to do better. We need to call out other oppressed communities that are committing lateral violence. And that's where it begins and that's where it ends. Anything after that, saying, oh, you know, this is how they always are, this is what they do, that becomes racist rhetoric, right? That's where we have to draw the line. But by being exactly what you said, Juan, being intellectually honest and saying, hey, they're just defending their identity. And this is what they do, right? They'll say that, hey, people that are defending their indigenous identity, they're being anti-black. This is a tactic for them to try to mute our voices when we say things like, hey, that Galveston mural needs to be changed, because the Olmec have nothing to do with the African-American experience, and that's not being anti-black, that's being factual, right? And so they would mute us by saying that, but we need to understand being intellectually honest it needs to be paramount in this stuff.
Which is exactly why someone just got blocked. So I just wanted to say this last thing.
Yeah. Like here, real quick, guys, because we had one supporter flip out. I swear to God, last time. If you are blocked from the chat, it is only for 300 seconds. Do not come back to us acting like we committed some egregious crime blocking you from the chat. Because we did that to this one guy, and I saw he got over it. He was like, "Oh, you guys blocked me. You guys are Satan. You guys are Satan." And I'm just like, no, bro, like, fucking relax. Like, it's 300 seconds, man. Fuck. All right, go ahead, Suklali.
So anyway, so it's just interesting to me because anytime I say anything like I just said, that happens, right? It's like, oh, she must be married to a black man. Oh, she must this. And it's like, wow, right? Like this whole hate that comes out. And it's interesting because it's always like those hardcore, people that claim to be for our people. The moment I say anything close to like, confronting the anti-blackness in our community as well, it's like, oh my gosh, here comes the attack. So I just want to let people know I'm used to it. Happens all the time. But like Lakota Guy said, we're being factual, right? It's about being factual, not about people's feelings, not about, oh, we have to protect, people's fragility. So anyway, just wanted to let people know it's an old tactic, absolutely.
I think that the current society that we're living in makes it hard for us to not hard, but I don't know, it's easy for us to get called racist for calling out these idiot organizations. I don't know if it's just me, but.
Well, the truth is, bro, you're hitting on something that we have never talked about, which is we don't have political power in media at all. I mean, we are the least advantageous, or we have the least amount of political might when it comes to mass media or getting the word out and stuff. We don't have structures and mainstream media and people like talking heads that are talking about indigenous issues. So when it comes to things like this, our voices are mute because we don't have that political power, which leads us back to that conversation we had 20 minutes ago about how do we have opportunities to get together and unite, because then we could talk about having people, representatives, on mass media say, hey, we need to remove this because it's factually incorrect. It's factually, oppressive and committing lateral violence against indigenous communities. The Olmec have nothing to do with the African-American experience.
Yeah, that's right. They were there. Oh man, you did hit the nail on the head too, my friend.
For sure.
But
yeah, this is. Oh, go ahead, Marcus.
Oh no, you can go first.
No, you go ahead, bro.
I was just gonna say that, I think we do have to come together, because the term, if I'm a Hispanic, so-called Hispanic person, and be like, oh, there's not enough Hispanics in this movie coming out. And then the director decides to put a bunch of Hispanics on there, but they all look Spanish. I'm like, oh, that's better. But I'm the one that's the so-called Hispanic that's obviously an indigenous person. So where's the representation there in that? All right, sorry, I'm just calling that out because it's just insane.
Marcus, there's always Lou Diamond Phillips to be the Indian for us. He's always the guy. And it's funny, I got this lady, I had to block her on TikTok, Juan, because she was like, you probably know who she is. She has white Yale in her profile. She's all educated, and she got mad at me because I said Lou Diamond Phillips is not indigenous. His mom is from the Philippines, and his dad's like Irish and German. It's like he's not indigenous, right? But he plays Indians and everything, And I mean, look, I love La Bamba, man. It's one of my favorite movies, man. I'm not gonna diss him, right? But at the same time, we got to recognize that exactly what you said. We don't have representation even in acting. Look at freaking Dance with Wolves. That was about the Lakota, right? Most of those actors were non-Lakota actors. Graham Greene wasn't even. He's a Canadian guy. He's not even Lakota. So At least he's indigenous, I guess. Wes Studi playing a Pawnee, even though he's full-blooded Cherokee, was kind of hilarious too.
I was going to ask who that person was when you said it. I guess I didn't know.
Yeah, we just need to get more representation. Like, imagine, like, this wouldn't even be a thing. This whole Olmec thing would not be a thing if we had power in terms of, like, you know how, like, everyone's like, oh, cancel culture. I mean, yeah, it's a thing, but, I mean, if we had so much power, we had cancel culture, cancel the fucking Olmec bullshit and call it racist for what it is, you know, and it'd be done and over with. But we don't have that power, unfortunately. We can't just cancel shit like that. We don't have anything. So we need to build that up.
Cancel culture?
We need to cancel. We need to do our own cancel culture, bro. We'll cancel shit like that immediately.
What's the Nawa word for cancel? We'll appropriate that for everyone, right?
Shit, I don't know, man. I don't know as much knowledge. If only Kurly. If Kurly was here, he'd
If Kurly was here, yeah.
Yeah, Kurly would speak the whole thing in Nawa.
No, and you know what about representation? I think it speaks to identity. Where years ago, like I mentioned before, Disney had hired Antonio Banderas, a Spaniard. They never made this film because we canceled it and killed it. They casted him to play Emiliano Zapata. This is Disney, of course, right? Shouldn't surprise us. But then if you look at new movies where they're hiring a bunch of Spanish women to take on roles of supposedly Mexican maids. We have, I forgot her name. There's a Spanish woman, Penelope Cruz is Spanish. And they've hired her to play a couple of roles of supposedly marginalized immigrant woman, right, who's trying to find her way in the U.S. And then Salma Hayek, who has never identified herself as obviously indigenous Mexican. She's Lebanese and some other European bloodline. So it's like, again, the representation matters. But when you use Hispanic and Latino, they use that to kind of blur the lines as far as who is, you know, these roles for, and they use most of the time European actors who have these supposed nationalities that come from supposedly Latin America, and it's like those of us who are indigenous are left at the end of that hiring line. And you're absolutely right when representation matters. But Hispanic and Latino makes it seem like we're homogenous. Everyone with a Spanish name, anyone with a Spanish surname could take this role, but we're going to give it to 100% Spaniard. And so there tells you the roles that happen. Now, another thing, too, is Rocho El Dorado was a cartoon. I don't know if you're familiar with it. That came out in the year 2000 or so. And there was an actual Chicano who did one of the voices of the caricature of the Mayan priest that was trying to do human sacrifice. This is a cartoon by Rocho El Dorado by DreamWorks Production, who is Steven Spielberg, who himself was the one that produced Schindler's List. So the man who produced a film like Schindler's List about the Jewish Holocaust finds it okay to make a cartoon about the Native experience, about two Spaniards, right, who invade our lands, and then they're given it's like this very comical sense to it. Right, so there goes the whole representation. It's like, why is it okay to make cartoons and make fun of indigenous cultures and then hire our own people that participate in this? Sadly, happens a lot, but it's like, again, playing into the whole stereotype, playing into misrepresentation. And when we are hired, what roles are we given? So definitely that needs to be completely deconstructed and put to rest.
Well said. Yeah, exactly. And adding on to that, like I said, is the so-called Hispanic going to continue to complain forever that there's not enough Hispanic positions in the role? Like, I don't care how many Spaniards you put in there, just put them in there. Then you yourself, as an indigenous appearing person, will never be represented in those movies. Why not say that you're indigenous instead? But you know, a lot of people are fed this propaganda, I will call it, at young ages.
I guarantee we're going to see a movie about Galvarino by Antonio Banderas or some Spaniard, man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we got to call out the Disneys and even, what was it? Cusco, Emperor's New Groove. All the voice actors were not played by indigenous people. I think one was played by Eartha Kitt, but she's not indigenous. At least,
right?
I don't think she is.
Yeah, I want to comment some. Evelyn Gilbert
Right.
said in there that they're working, that Hollywood's working with a small selection of indigenous people. That's actually completely untrue. The Screen Actors Guild, as well as the Actors Guild in Hollywood, has a massive amount of indigenous actors. There's all kinds. Even my own nation, I could probably tell you like 5 to 6 different actors. But again, exactly what these bros were talking about, and this sister here, is that they're literally picking people that are part of the European beauty standard. I mean, that's exactly what it is. You're not getting people like Yalitza to get parts about indigenous women. You're getting people like, Penelope Cruz, who literally looks like she's just got off the boat of Greek island or something like that. She has nothing to do with indigenous roles, but that's the issue, is that we do have people that are actors. We do have people that put in the time. We have people that are paying their Screen Actor Guild union fees and are literally not being picked because of this European beauty standard.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing to me is that we live in the United States, where we have a very large, Caucasian white population, but we are the biggest for advocating of fair representation for all, which is good. But then when you go to like Mexico and other countries, it's like, no, you must look Spanish looking, white in appearance. But the majority of that population clearly isn't Caucasian American. So it just shows that, a lot of countries still have a long way to go in terms of paving the way for those with, darker skin in general. I mean, everyone wants equal representation, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, I wanted to highlight a question Ancient America said. He says, is it better to have bad movies about ancient American stories than no movies about ancient American stories? He says, we can certainly complain about The Emperor's New Groove, Apocalypto, and Road to El Dorado, but they do give attention to indigenous culture, even if it's lacking. What do you guys say?
I mean, Apocalypto. That just put that and let's move on, right? I mean, that movie was crazy. I mean, what do you guys think about that movie? I mean, I know what a lot of my friends say about it, but maybe they're wrong. I mean,
so what I think about it is so the complaints I've heard from people is that it wasn't completely historically accurate, and then I've heard that painting our people as savages and all that, right? But I appreciated the movie because you actually had 100% or almost full blood looking indigenous people doing the roles, right? And the action scenes were badass. You had badass warriors. So I mean, I don't know. It just painted us differently. It painted us in a way that you never see, which is the warfare, the fighting, that we're badass. So I don't know. I still enjoyed the movie either way, but that's me.
Yeah, I agree with Ancient Americas too. It's good to show some representation. I mean, I guess with those movies, we can't all be happy, but I'm happy with what they've done. But I do hear that there was some disagreements in terms of Mayan Aztec representation in Apocalypto. I think misrepresentation.
Yeah, I have an opinion on Apocalypto for sure. So as far as representing, as far as being indigenous people were hired, indigenous culture was semi-represented. But if you look at the overall message, was they were already in demise by the time the Spanish came. They were already starving. They were already all this infighting. So it's an apologist film to say it was okay what the Spanish did because look what they were doing to each other. That is the argument that I have a problem with. Now, it also shows you the potential for what can be done to show the right, perspective on indigenous culture. Imagine a film like that actually told the truth. There's so many stories to tell. There's so many beautiful cultures that we have. So I was conflicted. I was like, okay, missed opportunity. You could have told a very beautiful, brave story, just like they do a lot with a lot of Asian films, like The Last Emperor, about I think the Qin Dynasty. Anyway, all these films, right, are really epic films. But it's with this one, it's you could have done such a beautiful service to the community and not make it seem like the Mayans did not know about the solar eclipse. Like the Mayans are the most accurate calendar of the world. How are you portraying them as simple-minded, didn't understand eclipse, and not even give them their proper importance and relevancy when it comes to the sciences? But as far as representation, yeah, we have Indigenous folks, we have beautiful people that are casted, but it's what's the underlying argument? Look at them. They're so savage. They were bound to be invaded, which reinforces that whole view of apologists. Oh, look, what was the point? They were saved by the Spanish. They were already in ruins. That's my problem with it.
Yeah, I agree with your points. I just like it mostly. Like how, what's his name? Yeah, Steven, he said he just likes it as an action movie. That's pretty much it. But it has a lot of flaws.
Maybe we got to go the Bollywood route, like do our own productions, like, small time, poorly produced productions like Bollywood, have like really like 13-minute song interludes and, And I always laugh at those movies, dude. Like there's this one video where it's like this gym fight scene and it is so preposterous. Like the shit this guy's doing, man. I'm like, holy shit. I'm just laughing. It's comedy to me, dude, when I watch those shit.
Yeah, they do have some interesting movies in Bollywood.
They buy him though, man. They look at him like, wow, that's amazing. The guy grabbed a Jeep by one hand and flew at 30 feet. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good fun.
Essentially, what it comes down to for us is that we need a bigger voice and more support for Indigenous roles in movies, and obviously more accurate accurate stories as well. So, but I think we did want to keep this under 2 hours, between 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
So, anyone else have anything to cover up?
No, I just want to tell you guys, I mean, you brothers, and of course our amazing sister here, our historian sister here, their amazing knowledge. Like, we need more of this conversation. We need more of this dialogue, and it's so heartwarming to see all the comments, that we have. Gabby, Evelyn, even Chingon Boss with his crazy comments. Some of them are crazy. Gabby, and of course, like everyone here. I mean, there's Ancient Americas. I mean, just, this is the dialogue we need. We need to have this type of forum. And thank you all so much for making space for me as a Northern Indigenous person to be a part of it. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming on such short notice.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Juan Choloa. Thank you, Lakota Guy. Thank you for everyone that's tuning in. I'm very grateful. This is very historical, for us to have a conversation intercontinentally, and really cherishing each other's perspectives and showing, how united we can be in the potential of what the future can look like. So I'm really, really grateful. And one last thing, I want to invite people. I'm teaching a class next Saturday, absolutely free on my channel, Mexican Excellence. Speaking of Mexican nationalism, it's going to be completely in the Spanish language. So for those of you who have relatives who only speak Spanish, I welcome them to please attend the course, absolutely free. And again, grateful for this space and time shared with y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. And, thank you to our viewers and everyone else that's checked us out.
Can I make one plug before we go?
Yeah.
For those that are interested, also, if you guys want to tune in Monday through Friday, my day job, what I get paid to do is Native Roots Radio, and that's a Indigenous focused radio show that's syndicated on FM and AM radio. It's nativerootsradio.com. It's also on Facebook. You can watch us live there. Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time to 7 p.m. Native Roots Radio. I co-host there, help with the background stuff. Thank you. Sorry to plug it. I just thought, heck, might as well, right?
No, send me a link to where maybe they can go view it, and I'll even put it in the description or the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So one last thing I wanted to say to you guys, which is very serious before we leave, is to the haters, we hate you too.
A unifying message, right?
That's right.
Yeah, but again, thank you both, Zalali and Lakota Guy. Appreciate it. Everyone else, y'all have a great day. We'll talk again. Wanchaloa. See y'all later.